Hello, everyone. It seems like it's been a while since I've kind of addressed you guys because of I've had a couple busy weeks between getting second at Toronto, playing Abysscraft, and then I went to Anime NYC with some friends this past weekend. So the videos haven't been flowing too much lately. I'm hoping to fix that now soon. Now that I'm back home and can actually get things going. With this video, though, we are going to be talking about the Gloryfinder cards, and this is part one of two. I might make a third part with more future sets, but with this video, I figured at least cover sets 1 through 5, the Uma Musume set, which is between sets 2 and 3, Idolmaster, which is, I believe, between sets 6 and 7, and then the Gloryfinder Bundle that was at the end of the 5th set, if I remember correctly, or at least somewhere about there. I figured this would be a good way to have new people kind of get into the format, kind of review pertinent cards of relevance to the game. And before each set, I'm just going to give kind of like a quick table of contents of the cards I'll be talking about. So if you just want to know the lists and then just look up the cards yourselves and read them, by all means, go ahead. But I also just kind of give my 2 cents. Hopefully the explanations won't be too terribly long. There are a lot of cards to go through. But yeah, so I just figured this video is going to be pretty long to go through. So, probably, if anything, you'd probably listen to it as almost like a podcast. But at the same time, if you're like, why is he talking about this card? At least I'm trying to give my reasoning. Part 2 is going to cover sets 6 through 10 and any crossovers during that time as well. So if you're already kind of familiar with the older sets, you can just kind of hop over to that one. Before we get too deep into the thick of it all, I do just want to make a quick shout out to Shintoverse's blog post on Gloryfinder. I'll have the link in the description that you can check out. Long story short, he kind of goes over the first 4 starter deck Gloryfinder decks with ways to improve them. Most, if not all, those cards are going to be talked about in this as well. But I also kind of re-evaluated the first 5 sets that he evaluates, because only 5 sets were out when he made the blog post. So I'll have more on my list as well, compared to what he talks about. And this video is not necessarily a explanation of how to build your decks, but you as the player probably want a certain mechanic or a certain card to be played or a certain style to be played. So this is just meant to kind of give you ideas and just to kind of, get your mind thinking as far as like, okay, can this card be applied to my deck or not? Another thing I want to bring up before we get to the cards is that there is 2 choice restrictions for the format, because the format's, obviously not the main format, so it just might not be super familiar with everybody. So while you're thinking of how to use cards, I just want you to think that these 2 choice restrictions are legal. But both choice restrictions have to do with Deepwood Anomaly. You basically can either have Deepwood or Grand Summoning in your deck, or Deepwood or Outrunning the Encroaching Heat. Outrunning the Encroaching Heat is probably a pretty straightforward one, because it basically gives Deepwood Storm, and then it just storms an opponent and you just auto win. There's a little bit more comboing with Grand Summoning, which eventually makes Deepwood pop off, but so long story, I don't want to get into the whole combo, but long story short, you can either have Deepwood or Grand Summoning, or Deepwood or Outrunning the Encroaching Heat. And as I'll talk about later, you pretty much are just okay with doing Deepwood, unless the Grand Summoning is a pretty powerful card, but unless you're doing some really crazy stuff with Grand Summoning, usually Deepwood is kind of the card you want to throw in your deck. Okay, last slide before I get to the actual cards, I promise. I wanted to kind of talk about what qualifies to be on this list, and then also this GF and the C in the corners. I just want to explain that real quick. So qualifications for this list are cards that, generally speaking, have pretty neutral effects. So a very common one you'll see is cards that just say deal X damage to an enemy follower, right? So very neutral, where just, pretty much any game you're going to obviously have to deal damage to enemy followers. The cards are core to most, if not all, Gloryfinder decks you would generally build. And by most, I kind of caveat that to be like 90% plus kind of decks. The next is it adds an interesting politic to the game. So the effect might not be necessarily like strong on its own, but because it is a multiplayer format, you might have kind of like a little bit of politicking with it where it's like, hey, if I scratch your back, will you scratch mine? Or those kind of, conversations. And the last is it could potentially create a fun mini game within the game, like rolling dice or, I know there's one card that I can't remember the name off the top of my head, but it's like, everyone picks a follower from their hand and shows in whoever has like the second highest cost follower gets to summon the follower or something akin to that. We'll get to it soon. So, but these are the kind of things I kind of look for the cards. There's obviously a lot of archetypal specific cards that, if you're going to obviously want to build certain archetype like Combo, for example, or Necrocharge, for example, obviously there's going to be more cards than just this to look at. But these are about as like neutral, but still good cards as possible, just while you're thinking about deck building. The GF in the bottom left is just an indicator that the card comes with either the Gloryfinder Bundle that came out around set 5 or one of the two Gloryfinder starter decks that recently came out, the Treacherous Ambitions and Luxheart Legends decks. It basically comes in one of those. And long story short, honestly, if you're getting into the format, you might as well just buy the bundle and the two starter decks, because that gives you a lot of copies of just good cards you need, and a lot of good Gloryfinder cards are just exclusive cards to Gloryfinder that you can only get in those either the bundle or the two starter decks. So it just helps kind of cut down on a lot of the redundancy of just saying, this card's in the Gloryfinder bundle or starter deck. And the blue C in the bottom right just means it's a card that I consider core to a deck that basically 90+% of decks would run, generally speaking, no matter what the game plan is. And again, it's just there just to cut all the redundancy of me saying this is a good core card, run it. So that's pretty much it. On to the actual cards now. Here's all the cards I will be talking about in the upcoming portion of this video. So if you know all these cards, or you just want to look up the cards yourself and just read them and just, think about it yourself, certainly feel free to. I'm going to be going from top left down, and then the top middle down, and then the top right down. So Force, Dragon, Sword, Abyss, Rune, Haven, and then Neutral in that specific order. So let's get on to the actual first card, Robin Hood. He is a 5-cost 4/4 that on Fanfare you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 4 damage, and you can pay 1 and tap it to select an enemy follower in the field and deal it 4 damage. So free 4 damage on summon, and then you can pay 1 more to tap it to deal 4 to something else. Starting off strong with just here's a neutral damage dealing follower. Silverbolt is up next. It's a 7-cost spell that says quick. You can select an enemy leader or enemy follower on the field, draw a card, and then deal X damage to the selected enemy. X equals the number of cards in your hand. So you could kind of do some fun politicking with trying to see if you should hit certain people over others for face, or hold on to 7 play points. And if your opponent's pretty low on life, like let's say you have 6 or 7 cards in hand, so Silverbolt, you could do a good amount of damage to an enemy leader. You could hold on to Silverbolt past turn with at least 7 play points up, wait for your opponent who's getting pretty low to maybe get hit, or maybe convince one of your other opponents to hit them to get them closer to death, and then you just be like, bam, Silverbolt dead. So a little bit of fun politicking there. Or if you let's say somehow tutor out the card, or somehow people know it's in your hand, maybe you grabbed it from cemetery somehow, you can kind of hold a proverbial gun, I suppose, with dealing some damage to somebody in particular, if you decide to not be in alliance with one person but be in alliance with other people. Woodkin Curse is up next. It's a 2-cost quick spell that says you can select an enemy follower on the field, and it cannot deal damage this turn. So if you're low on life and your opponent's trying to storm you down for damage or something, you got 2 play points. You can just be like, quick, can't deal me damage this turn. That also does include effect damage. So if there's a follower that could potentially do effect damage, but granted, the effect damage probably going to be an act or fanfare where you can't necessarily counter it or quick it. So it probably, for all intents and purposes, really only deals with attacks. But depending on how opponents tend to do turn orders, you might be able to stop some effect damage. Next up is Homecoming. It's a 3-cost spell that really the biggest point of this card was just the first effect, which says select an enemy follower on the field. Its controller puts it on the top or bottom of their deck. So they get to choose, where it goes. I suppose, you do have the combo 5 part of each opponent puts each follower from their field on the top or bottom of their deck instead. So if you kind of run a more combo heavy deck, that could work well for you. But at the end of the day, sometimes your opponent just has a really big dude that even if they say put it on the top of their deck, so they just draw it the next turn, it's like, well, that's, you've delayed it 1 extra turn, so a lot could happen, between getting back around to the opponent. Up next is Arthurian Light. It's a 2-cost amulet that has one of 3 act abilities you can choose. The first one costs 1 play point, and you engage the amulet, and you can summon a night token, and it has Storm. The second ability, you can engage it and pay 2 play points to select an enemy follower on the field and engage it, or you can pay 3 and engage it to draw a card. I know nowhere on it does it say that these effects are once per turn. However, because you have to engage the card for any of the effects, it effectively means you can only choose one of these effects once per turn. This is not a bad card to honestly start the game out with, because with Gloryfinder, you start with 3 play points, so you can just play the amulet for 2 and then pay 1 to get a Knight with Storm and just get a free. I know it's only 1 damage, but hey, it's better than nothing, and at least then is there where you can just summon a Knight later. The second effect of engaging an enemy follower, that might be useful. You might want to swing into something that was just played that's not engaged. The third effect of drawing a card for 3, that seems a little expensive, so probably wouldn't be used too much until maybe more in the late game, where you're kind of at 10 play points, and most cards tend to be about 7 or less play points to play in general. So that's kind of more late game, it seems like. But still, every turn you come around, even in the early game, to just summon a Night token whenever you have a free, floating 1 play point, that can kind of get really annoying after a while. Gemstaff Commander is next. It's a 3-cost, 3/2 follower that on Fanfare, you can search your deck for a Swordcraft follower, reveal it, and add it to your hand. The fact that you can just get any Swordcraft follower is pretty strong. Most decks in general are probably going to have a decent mix of any certain class. So if you kind of know what you're looking for with Swordcraft, you can throw Gemstaff Commander in the deck as kind of like a second copy of the card. Kind of the decks in general tend to kind of want a decent amount of draw and tutoring, because of just having 50 copies of one card makes the deck really inconsistent. So having a bunch of different tutors kind of helps get the deck be more consistent in its game plan. Next is the first card I consider core, with the blue C in the bottom right, but it's Made Leader. It's a 1-cost, 1/1 follower that evolves for 2. And on evolve, you can search your deck for a follower with E, with the E, to Evo, reveal it, and add it to your hand. And considering Gloryfinder decks can have 20 cards that can evolve, you got 20 cards in your deck you can search from. So Made Leader, just generally speaking, you can just grab almost, I guess technically 2/5 of your deck, in theory. And with her costing 3 play points total between her 1 play point and the 2 to evolve, you can literally play your turn 1 to search for, even if it's a 3-cost, 3-3 evolves for 1 into a 4/4 follower, because, on the next turn you'll have 4 play points to use. So, this is kind of why I consider it, a core card for most decks. Sage Commander is up next. It's a 5-cost 5/5 that has a simple effect of when you summon it, you have every other follower on your field +1/+1, which doesn't sound a lot, but if your deck does tend to want to spam a lot of followers, tends to fall more into the Swordcraft sphere of Gloryfinder decks. Given ultimately +4/+4 to the field, it can be pretty strong in certain situations. So I figured he's pretty neutral, and just kind of throw him in here as an option. Up next is Shadowed Assassin. It's a 4-cost 4/4 that evolves for 2, so a little more expensive on the Evo. But on Fanfare, you select an enemy follower in the field and engage it, and then on evolve, you can select an engaged enemy follower and destroy it. So the basic idea being, pop the thing you just engaged when you summoned it. But at the same time, you could also engage something you could at least swing over and keep Shadowed Assassin alive. and when you evolve it, pop something else that might be even bigger that already attacked and is already engaged. So it could potentially be a 2-for-1, just depending on how the field is. And considering there's 3 other people to fight, you're going to have usually a decent amount of followers on the field. Next up is Navy Lieutenant. It's a 2-cost 2/3 follower that on Fanfare you select another follower on your field and give it a sail. It seems like a sail in Gloryfinder is actually kind of valuable keyword because there's a lot of followers that either have like aura, so they're tough to hit with card effects, or the opponent might try to keep their follower standing just as a way to make it harder to deal with them. So giving something a sail that might be able to crash into a standing follower on the other field might be a good way to kind of get better board control. So, pretty neutral as far as any follower can get it. So I figured just throw it in here as an option for people. Next is a common classification of cards that you'll see pretty frequently in almost every class in some way, and that is 3-cost 5 damage spells, where usually it will be 3 cost of 5 damage, but then there's usually an extra effect or a little bit of benefit in some way, shape, or form. I'm more familiar with Yuzuki Righteous Demon and her being able to pay 3 to deal 5 to something and mill 1, which we'll get to. I believe that's in the second video. But Onslaught's kind of the first one that was ever made. So it's a 3-cost spell that you deal 5 damage to an enemy follower and you get a free Knight token in the EX area. And so I'm not going to necessarily go over every single Onslaught copy unless it's like remarkably good for some other reason. But if it's basically a 3-cost 5 damage spell, it's basically a variation of Onslaught that you can consider for whatever way you build your deck. All right, we're moving on to the Runecraft cards in set 1. Alchemical Lore is the first one. It's a 5-cost spell and deals 4 damage to each enemy follower on the field. So that's all 3 of your other opponent's board. So 4 damage is pretty good. It hits a lot of the lower cost followers that are pretty common to play. So, throwing this into your deck to help establish better board control on your opponents is not a bad option at all. Fate's Hand is up next. It's a 3-cost spell that at quick you can draw 2 cards. And if you have Spell Chain 10, you can recover a play point. That might come into play depending on how you build your deck. But at the same time, also a lot of decks just tend to have a decent amount of spells. And since you have 50 singletons, you're probably going to have a decent amount of spells in general in the deck. So later in the game, you might just hit Spell Chain 10 and you might not even be a Spell Chain deck. Also keep in mind, that again, you start with 3 play points in the game, so you could literally just start the game and just be like, I draw 3 cards, or not draw 3 cards. I play 3 to draw 2. So it helps just kind of cycle your hand to get to more cards in your deck. So it's just a good even turn 1. It's something very early on if you're used to the standard format that you always think you kind of start with 1 play point and then 2 and then 3, but not in Gloryfinder. So just kind of keep in mind that 3 cost cards are kind of really turn 1 cards. Next up is Merlin. She is a 3-cost 3/2 that on Fanfare you can search your deck for literally any spell, reveal it, and add to your hand. She evolves for 2, and on evolve you can select a spell that costs 3 play points or less in the cemetery and play it for 0. So, Tutor in a deck of 1-ofs is really good. And the biggest option that most people probably will initially think of with her is using Dragon Oracle, tutoring Dragon Oracle with Merlin and then playing it, and then you can evolve her and then play Dragon Oracle again for free, get the double ramp. Early on it can be a little it takes a little bit to get it going, but if you can get a double ramp, that's pretty good resource gain for you in the long run. And last of the Runecraft cards is Sorcery Cache. It's a 2-cost quick spell that says, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, and you can reveal a spell from among them and add it to your hand. And then you can also put a spell to your cemetery, and then you put the remaining cards in the bottom of your deck in any order. So it's kind of more of a consistency option. Obviously, a lot of decks are just going to run a lot of spells, so you can just run Sorcery Cache to try to get some, more consistency in the deck. You'll notice throughout this whole video that there's going to be a lot of consistency options depending on what your play style is. Heading over into set 1 Dragoncraft, we are starting with the spell Conflagration. It's a 5-cost spell that says deal 5 damage to each follower on the field. Do keep in mind that it does include your own field, but that being said, with there being 3 other opponents, usually your own followers won't survive that long anyways, so usually it's not a big deal. And even if your follower is alive, you could always attack with it first and then play Conflagration to deal with, the board. And do keep in mind this actually also deals damage to enemies with aura, because it is not targeting the follower directly. It is just a blanket, damage on the board. Next up is Shapeshifting Mage. Is a 2-cost 2/2 follower that on Fanfare, if Overflow is active for you, you give him +3/+3. So that's pretty solid in regards to everyone's going to eventually hit Overflow eventually. So early game, it will just, be a 2/2, but later on it can be a 5/5. It evolves for 1, and when you evolve it, it gets Assailant Bane, along with obviously getting Rush because it was evolved. So once evolved, best case, it's a 5/5 with Rush, Assailant Bane, so easy to run it into multiple things to kill it. Same thing with, enemy followers running into it with the Bane, it'll kill them. So, and keep in mind with it being a 2-cost 1 Evo, you can actually just play this on turn 1. Next up is Serpent Wrath. It's a 3-cost spell with Quick, and it says you can select an enemy follower on the field, deal 5 damage, and if Overflow is active for you, which means you have 7 or more max play points, you get to draw a card. So every deck is, like I said before, gonna be hitting Overflow at some point just throughout the course of a game, whether you actually ramp or not. So you always have the possibility of drawing a card, and otherwise, dealing 5 damage to an enemy follower is pretty good, especially when you have it as a quick option too. Ayala Dragon Knight is the next follower. She's a 3-cost 3/2 with a sail, and her last word says you can increase your max play points by 1. So there's going to be a few cards that ramp, and a lot of decks want to do it just to obviously try to get resources faster. Her I have a few qualms with it. It is unfortunate that she is a last words instead of like a fanfare. The fanfare would have been nice. To the point where, the opponents could kind of almost ignore her and just not even attack into her. So just to deny you the 1 max play point. But for what it's worth, the assail is nice, where even if they ignore her, when you come back around to your turn, if there's still a follower on the enemy field, you're more than likely going to be able to have her crash into it and get the max play point. But at the same time, it would have been nice with the fact that she doesn't have Summoning Sickness at that point to be able to just, hit somebody for 3 damage. But playing devil's advocate against that, everyone starts with 30 life. So usually that 3 damage is not going to be like the biggest deal in the world to the opponent. Next up is Wyvern Cavalier. She's a 5-cost 5/5 that on Fanfare, you put the top card of your deck into your EX area and it costs 2 less to play. And as far as I can tell, that seems to be forever. So even if it comes back around to your turn later on after your opponent's, it's 2 less to play. Most cost reductions say for the rest of the turn it costs less. But Wyvern Cavalier seems to be one of the exceptions, so that's why it's not only effectively a nice draw one, but whatever you draw does just cost 2 less to play, so you can play it a little bit quicker. Next up is the infamous Shenlong. It's a 5-cost 4/5 follower that on Fanfare you draw 2 cards and then you can discard a card, and he has Ward. He does evolve for 2, so his evolve's a little more expensive, but on evolve you do just gain 5 life, which is really strong, and he still retains the Ward, so he helps with your consistency with drawing 2. A lot of decks probably would want some card in the cemetery, so that's where you can discard, and just getting 5 life and a Ward at 5-6 stats is just, good overall. So I kind of threw him in the core category because what deck just wouldn't want this level of consistency and life gain? Blazing Breath is up next, and it's a kind of spell that I'm going to be referencing whenever I come across someone called Angelic Snipe spells, which I'll explain in a second. But as far as the effect goes, it's a 1-cost spell that has Quick, and it says select an enemy follower in the field and deal 2. But if Overflow is active for you, deal 4 instead. Overflow being if you have 7 play points or more, max play points or more, I should specify. But yeah, this is kind of an Angelic Snipe clone, where Angelic Snipe is basically a 1-cost spell that says Quick, deal 2 damage to an enemy follower. A lot of classes tend to have that plus something more to it. So Blazing Breath just is kind of a better Angelic Snipe for Gloryfinder, especially since, again, everyone's going to get to 7 play points eventually relatively quickly. All right, shifting from Dragoncraft over to Abysscraft, we are starting with Wardrobe Raider. It's a 3-cost 3/3 spell that's free to evolve, and on evolve, she does not gain any stats, which is unfortunate. However, on evolve, you do put a follower from your field into its cemetery, and then you can select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it. So there's a lot of cards that can kind of summon weenies, like that Swordcraft Arthur spell earlier, where for 1 play point you can just summon a knight with Storm. So you can always just play a knight, swing with it, and then just play Wardrobe Raider and pop the knight, and then just pop any follower on the opponent's field, no matter how big it is. So, and then Wardrobe Raider also gets Rush, so you could always run her into something as well. Medusa is up next. She's a 6-cost 6/6 follower that if Sanguine's active for you, she does cost 1 less to play, and if you have Necrocharge 10 or more, this card also costs 1 less to play. So in a best case scenario, it'll probably cost 4, but in a probably normal average game scenario that isn't even basing the deck off of Necrocharge, hitting Necrocharge 10 isn't really out of the ordinary. So, on average, you might get 5 costs from time to time. She has Bane, so whether she attacks something or something runs into her, it will die. And then you can just tap her, and select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it. So just good automatic enemy removal in general. Righteous Devil is up next. He's a 4-cost 2/4 follower with Bane. His Evo is a little strange in the sense of you just pay 3 life to evolve him instead of him needing any Evo points or play points. He does get Assailant Bane and the innate Rush because you do evolve him. And then he does get an added ability that says whenever an enemy follower is destroyed, you deal damage to its leader and you give your leader 1 life. And the initial thought you may think of is, oh, okay, just rush with Assailant Bane into an enemy follower. It dies, you heal 1, they get dealt 1. And, maybe best case scenario that can happen twice because, you might have an enemy follower also run into him to finally finish him off after the first attack. So, if he dies from a battle, he still sees that the enemy follower dies from Bane. So, the enemy leader will still take 1 damage and you'll still heal 1. So ultimately it's a net loss of 1 life because of his Evo. But also keep in mind that it just says whenever an enemy follower is destroyed at all. So even if your opponents are having some kind of debacle to your sides, and they're just trying to kill each other's followers, this still triggers and still deals the damage to whoever's followers get destroyed, and you still gain the benefit of healing 1. So this adds a nice little bit of politics where, it might draw, some ire onto you, but at the same time, if somebody else is also drawing some ire and people are trying to figure out what to deal with, it adds that fun, little bit of politicking into the game. Cerberus is up next. She's a 4-cost 3/3 follower that on Fanfare you can get a Mimi or Coco token into your EX area, but if you have Necrocharge 10 you get a copy of both. She does cost 2 to evolve, but on evolve you do just get another copy of Mimi and Coco into your EX area, and there's not enough space on the screen for me to add the Mimi and Coco tokens, but on the Cerberus base you can see what they do. Mimi is a 0-cost spell that says select an enemy follower in the field and deal 2 damage, and Coco is a 0-cost spell that gives one of your followers 2 attack, so you can kind of save them in the EX area, and if you need to use them on enemy followers, with the Mimis to deal damage to them, or if you want to deal more damage to an enemy leader, you can give one of your followers the +2 attack, and then obviously she still gets Rush from evolving. Mordecai the Duelist is next. He's a 5-cost 5/5 that says on last words, you can give your leader -3 life to put this follower back on the field. Pretty generic, and considering everybody starts at 30, in theory, assuming nobody hits you directly, you could res him potentially up to 10 times. So that's just a lot of resource gain. But because of other reasons, honestly, the first 20 life usually doesn't tend to matter too much. So if you play this card kind of early on, you pay 3 life, it's whatever, at least until someone plays Azazel, and then you're down to 10 life. Keep in mind that the 3 life is a cost, which is why there's a colon right after it, which means you don't have to pay the 3 life. The cost is optional. So if you're getting down and you're like, I don't need them anymore, you can just let them die and you don't have to resurrect them. Dire Bond is up next. It's a 1-cost amulet that on Fanfare you deal damage to your leader and you draw a card, and then you may pay 2 play points, send the card to the cemetery, deal another damage to your own leader and draw a card. So it's essentially a draw 2 for 3 play points and 2 life, which early on, first turn you start with 3 life, so you could just easily just fulfill both parts and just, pay 3 play points, deal 2 damage to yourself, and draw 2. There's a better version later on that I'll talk about called Sacred Plea, but at least for consistency, and because you only run 1 copy of the card, if you're looking for more draw, you could always run Dire Bond. And if your deck runs more of like a Sanguine package theme of some kind, well, here you go. It works perfectly. So just want to throw it out there, and especially since you start with 30 life, paying 2 life to draw 2 is not the end of the world. Hell's Unleasher is a 2-cost 2/2 follower that says act, engage it, and just put it into your cemetery to select a follower that costs at least 3 play points. So that means 3 or more play points in your cemetery, and add it to your hand. This is a little bit weird compared to most other cards you'll come across, where usually it's, grab a X cost or less follower. This is 3 cost or higher, so you can grab your bigger targets from the cemetery with him. This is the first printing of him from set 1 in the set 2, or not set 2, the Gloryfinder bundle. He is rephrased to be a little more clarified. Neither text is technically wrong, but just reading this, some people may innately think, oh, he only grabs a 3 cost or less. So I just like to try to clarify for people. Up next is a card that is a favorite of mine, Death's Breath. It's a 6-cost spell that says you can select a follower that costs 8 play points or less in your cemetery and put it onto your field and give it ward. So effectively, there are 8-cost followers that are pretty good and pretty big statted that don't have ward innately. So effectively, you're playing it for 2 less and give it an extra buff of the ward. The main one I think of is Refill in set 4, which we'll get to, much later on in the video. But obviously a lot of decks want to run big followers. So, why not just freely res it for, usually 1 or 2 less. Even there's some followers that are even 5 costs that sometimes it just feels fine to just pay 1 more play point to effectively play it from the cemetery. So it's a very flexible card depending on what you want to do with your followers. The second to last Abysscraft card we're going to talk about is Soul Conversion. It's a 1-cost quick that says you can select a follower on your field, destroy it, and draw 2 cards. There are a decent amount of cards that, let you summon kind of weenie followers, and you can just use this to sack them. So just a good, help to consistency depending on how you want to build your deck. Not every deck will run this, obviously, because sometimes you might want bigger followers that you don't want to sacrifice, but if you do kind of run smaller followers, like I know Swordcraft tends to have kind of more of like a swarming play style. If you play that, Soul Conversion is a nice option for that. Undead King is the last Abysscraft spell we'll talk about. It's a 6-cost 6/6 follower that says you can select up to 2 followers in your cemetery and add them back to your hand. So that's literally any follower. So pretty good in a deck of one-ofs that, you might have a follower or 2 you want to replay. He's also a decent target for Death's Breath. He's, cost 6 himself, so it's not like Death's Breath is making you have to spend more to play him. And he does get ward for free, so he can, help defend you for a turn. So overall, just good. And also things like Loki, which we'll get to in the Gloryfinder Bundle section, but he makes your followers' fanfares trigger twice on the next turn after you play Loki. So if you play Loki on turn 6 and then you play Undead King on turn 7, or a 6 play point turn and a 7 play point turn, then you can get up to 4 followers from your cemetery back to your hand. So it's pretty crazy. All right, moving on to Havencraft. We got Themis' Decree. It's a 5-cost spell that just says destroy each follower on the field, and that does include your own, so just kind of keep that in mind. But it does help get around cards that have aura, because this doesn't target them. And because of how generic it is, and the fact that it can just wipe everything on everyone's board, it's potentially up to on a good day up to 15 cards on the other boards just for 5 play points. That's pretty good. So that's why I kind of gave it the core category, and probably most decks, generally speaking, will want to run it, especially since it's only a 1-of. Jeanne d'Arc is next. She's a 4-cost 3/4 follower that on fanfare you deal 2 damage to each enemy follower on the field, and she evolves for 2, and on evolve she deals 2 more damage to each enemy follower on the field, and then also gives each other follower on your own field 2 defense. So good board wipe and board buff. So just why not potentially hit up to 15 other followers for 4 damage, potentially even 6 if you play Loki before Jeanne d'Arc. Sacred Plea is a 1-cost amulet that on summon actually does literally nothing, but you can sacrifice it to draw a card, or you can pay 2 play points, tap it, and sack it to draw 2 cards. So essentially, starting turn 1 with 3 play points, you can really just draw 2 cards for essentially free. But that being said as well, it's essentially also a better Dire Bond because, you don't have to pay the 2 life to play it and draw 2. But obviously in a format of singletons, 1 Sacred Plea, you might just never even see it in the game. So if you want a little more consistency, you might just, say, okay, well, I'm willing to at least also run Dire Bond as well. And like I said before, with Dire Bond, 2 life is not a big deal in a game where you start with 30. Prism Priestess is the next follower, and it's essentially an amulet tutor. It's a 1-cost 1/1 that evolves for 2, and on evolve you can search for an amulet and add it to your hand. And since you start the game with 3 play points, you could literally just play her turn 1 and search for an amulet you want. And she does obviously get rush when evolving, so just, again, another good tutor consistency card. Shrine Knight Maiden is next, and she's pretty simple. She's a 5-cost 5/5 that has Ward and Aura, and so, you could just play her for 5 play points and just have her stand there, even if there's nothing threatening on the board. And just the fact that she has Aura, a lot of times she'll just survive till your next turn, and even if not, it's not the end of the world, but she's just very generic. And I know there's like Storm Ward decks as well that might actually want the Ward on her to kind of get the effects. And since, the whole deck is singleton cards, you might start to run low on Storm Ward options that maybe you might want Shrine Knight Maiden. Up next is Blackened Scripture. It's a 2-cost quick spell that says you can select an enemy follower with 3 defense or less and banish it. So keep in mind that doesn't mean that the enemy follower has to start with a 3 defense when it's summoned. Just as long as it gets to 3 defense or less, you can banish it. So even if it's like some big 10/10 follower that you're able to slowly chip away down to 3, and then you can just kick it out of the game. Real nice against some cards that might have last word effects, because when you banish it, it won't get the last word effects because that only triggers when it goes to the cemetery. So, and it has quick, so you can hold on to it during your opponent's turns if they play something on their turn that you don't want them to keep on the board. Dark Offering is next. It's a 1-cost spell with quick that says you can select a card on your field, destroy it, and give your leader 3 defense and draw a card. So it's very similar to Soul Conversion. However, there is one, I think, bigger difference than a lot of people initially think. Dark Offering says you can select any card on your field, where Soul Conversion is specifically a follower. So if there's like an amulet on the board that you want to get rid of, you can also sack the amulet. And I know there's a lot of amulets that also just have last word effects, so you can just sack it with Dark Offering. So it has a little bit more flexibility, and the 3 life might actually make or break you surviving. So, where Soul Conversion doesn't offer that form of protection. Curate is next. She's a 6-cost 5/5 follower that on Fanfare, you give your leader 5 life and you draw a card. Because she is a 6-cost, you could Death's Breath her back to gain 5 life and draw a card. Or also, if you played Loki on the previous turn and then you play Curate, you'll actually get 10 life and draw 2 cards. So just helps with consistency and sustain in general. So, why not potentially add it to your deck? Next up is a card that I think is kind of underrated, but it's Death Sentence. It's a 3-cost amulet that says when you put it on the field, it comes in engaged, so it just comes in tapped. And then it has an act ability where you can act, tap it, put it into the cemetery, and select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it. So essentially, you play it. You can't activate its act ability on the same turn you play it because it's already engaged, because that's part of its cost. However, now your opponent knows you have it on your board for the rest of the next 3 turns, at least until you come back around to your turn. So it adds this fun bit of politicking where people know it's there, and so they got to kind of figure out how much they want to commit to the board, and have one of their followers potentially killed by Death Sentence. And also you can kind of use it to your own benefit, where you can tell your opponent, hey, I won't kill your stuff, but if do you want me to kill this other opponent's big follower, I'll kill that if you do something for me later on. Kind of adds that little bit of fun politicking where you kind of have like a ace up your sleeve if needed. Moving on to the neutrals, we have Lucifer. He's a 7-cost 6/7 with Ward, and at the start of your end phase, you can give your leader 4 defense. He does evolve for free, and when he evolves, he kind of becomes the opposite and becomes more aggro than heal, where he gains Bane and Rush, because obviously he evolved. And then at the start of your end phase, you deal 4 damage to each enemy leader. So, if he kind of sticks on the board for a few turns, it can kind of start adding up. So when you start to play him, he tends to be public enemy number 1. But yeah, dealing 4 damage to everyone else for essentially 12 damage. Pretty good. Execution is next on the list. It's a 4-cost quick that says select an enemy card on the field and destroy it. Because you can play it on, the second turn, and literally destroy any card as long as it doesn't have aura or says this card can't be destroyed by card effects. You can kill it, and you could always just hold 4 play points just to, get into people's minds of, oh, does he have execution or not? So because of all that, I kind of threw him in the core category for most decks, I'd say. Up next is Erd. She's a 4-cost 2/2, so a little understated. However, she says select an enemy follower on the field and put it into its owner's EX area. And there's a little bit of text there saying that if the follower that you kick back to the EX area is evolved, they lose the Evo and they go back to their base form. And then you can evolve her for 1, and you can select a card in your opponent's EX area and banish it. So, more times than not, you're just going to banish the thing that you just kicked back to their EX area. But that being said, there are some cards that say, just add cards to your EX area. So it's essentially like free draws. So if your opponent has something in there that you don't like, you could also use Erd to kick it back or to banish it instead. So just good control. And then she obviously still gets Rush for evolving. So you could always run her into something that's a low statted follower. Up next is Path to Purgatory. It's a 3-cost amulet that says on fanfare, you draw 3 cards and you deal 3 damage to your own leader. And then at the start of your end phase, if your leader's defense is 6 or less, you can tap it and sack it to the cemetery to deal 6 damage to each enemy follower on the field. So, across all 3 other boards on your opponent's side. Adds a little bit of fun politicking with people who are maybe trying to kill you. They trying to dance around this, trying to keep you maybe at 7 until they can finally just blow you out for 7 damage. And also just early on, you can play this turn 1, deal 3 damage to your leader and draw 3. So, oh no, you're at 27 life instead of 30. Whatever, not a big deal. And also if your opponents try to keep your life at about 7, if you have cards that burn yourself, so you get down to 6 on your own terms, then you could actually do a pretty good damaging board wipe to the opponent's boards. Next up is Gabriel. She's a 6-cost 4/3 follower that has ward and says on fanfare, you select another follower on your field and give it 4 attack and 3 defense and assail. So if your opponents kind of leave something up that they don't really think is a huge deal, maybe a low stated follower that's like a 2/3 or 3/2 or something like that, and they just leave it up because whatever, they don't really care. You can be like, well, I'm going to give it a big buff and swing at you for a lot of damage, or, give it a sail and rush it into something that might be a bigger threat. So pretty flexible in its use. Next up is the tried and true Bellringer Angel. She's a 1-cost follower that has 0/2 stats, and she has ward and last words of draw a card. She does evolve for 2, and on evolve, you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 2 damage. So you can basically play her turn 1 with 3 play points, and if your opponent already played some small follower, you can just play her, pay 2 play points to evolve her, and then deal 2 damage to some other small follower. A lot of tutors or, 2 defense followers as well. And then, she's just a small wall, but, you do get to draw a card when she dies too. Altered Fate is a fun card. It's a 2-cost spell that says each player returns their hand to their deck, shuffles it, and draws X cards. X equals the number of cards they return to their deck, and then you draw 1 more card. So essentially, you're replacing the Altered Fate itself as well. So if you kind of have a kind of more bad hand, you can try to get a better hand, but it also might just completely mess up your opponent's hands as well, and they have to totally change their game plan. So it adds a little fun dynamic to the whole game. Our penultimate card is Harnessed Glass. She's a 3-cost 2/3 that says on fanfare you can draw a card, and then you can put a card from your hand to the bottom of your deck. So it helps just kind of cycle your hand and just get a better consistent hand. There might be cards that you have in hand that you don't want necessarily in the cemetery, but you want to potentially get later when you have to shuffle the deck and gets it closer to the top of the deck. So just pretty good card, and because it's 3 costs, you can play it literally turn 1. And the last card in set 1 is Angelic Barrage. It's a 1-cost quick spell that says you can deal 1 damage to each enemy follower on the field, which 1 doesn't seem like a lot, but considering this gets around aura, and you could also work with your opponents. If one opponent has like a really decently big follower and one of your opponent says that they can get it down to like even 1 defense, and you can be like, don't worry, I got you on that 1 last bit of damage to kill it. You can have a little bit of cooperation with allies and matches as well. All right, now that we're done with set 1, we have starter deck cards we can talk about, starting from top left down, then middle down, and then right down is the order that I'll be talking about them. Forestcraft and Swordcraft didn't have any new additions. Runecraft does have a few with Demon Flame Mage and its Evo, Insight, Fire Chain, Penguin Wizard and his Evo, Magic Missile. Dragoncraft has Dragon Oracle, Dragon Warrior and his Evo, and Dragon Wings. Abysscraft just has Alucard, and Havencraft has Hair of Illusions, Acolyte's Light, and Priest of the Cudgel and his Evo, and then Neutral had nothing new for the starter decks. First up is Demon Flame Mage. It's a 3-cost 3/3 follower that evolves for 1, and on evolve you deal 2 damage to each enemy follower on the field, so just good board damage early game. And you can just basically play her either turn 1 with an Evo point or turn 2 if you're unfortunately the last person that didn't get an Evo point. Insight's a pretty simple 1-cost quick spell that just says you get to draw a card. So, if you just have a lingering play point and you can play it at any time, you could hold on to the 1 play point for a while to make people think maybe you have an Angelic Snipe clone or a Angelic Barrage or maybe even something else depending on what you're playing. So, and then once it gets around to your turn, you could just be like, and last play point, I play Insight before I, refill my play points and draw for the turn. Fire Chain is a 2-cost quick spell that says you can select up to 2 enemy followers on the field and deal 3 damage divided between them. So, if your opponents have like a couple small followers, you could choose 1 on one board and 1 on the other and kill them both. Especially at quick, you can just kind of hold on to it for, during their turns as well. The ever so adorable Penguin Wizard is up next. He's a 2-cost 1/4 follower that has an act where you can discard a spell and tap him to draw a card. And then he evolves for 1, and on evolve he does refresh, where then you can again tap him and discard a spell to draw a card. So, a little bit of cycling there if you have some spells in your hand that you really don't want, or you even need to get your spell chain up, so you can just use him instead. Keep in mind too, if he survives around to your turn, you could actually, and you didn't evolve him, you could actually in theory swing with him once with the 1 damage, evolve him, restand him, and he gets to swing again. I think it's kind of niche and not super normal to do that, but I just realized that was a funny little mechanic you could do with him. Magic Missile is next. It's the last spell in the Runecraft category. It's a 3-cost quick spell that says you can select an enemy follower on the field, deal 2 damage, and draw a card. So you get a little bit of consistency, you get a little bit of damage, and with it being quick, you can hold on to it, and it costs 3 play points. So literally, if this is like your only 3-cost spell in your hand when you start the game, you could just literally hold on to it and wait for your opponents to play something, and then just play Magic Missile on it to, even if it doesn't kill it, deal some damage, and you still get a draw card, so you're not losing out on any hand advantage. Moving on to Dragoncraft, we have Dragon Oracle. It's a 2-cost spell that you can choose one of 2 effects. You can either increase your max play points by 1, or you can draw a card. Most people are probably going to opt for the first to try to get more play points faster, and so you can get to your higher cost followers faster. And because of how neutral and generic it is, I gave it the core category as well. Up next is Dragon Warrior. It's a 3-cost 3/3 follower that on evolve for 1, it lets you select an enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage. A lot of cards you'll hear be called Dragon Warrior clones, because I think Dragon Warrior was kind of the first card that did this, where it's a 3-cost 3/3 that evolves for 1, has an on-evolve effect and becomes a 4/4, and the on-evolve effect is usually a pretty strong, if not at least decent effect. There is technically a better version of this card called Blaster Dark in the Vanguard collab. But again, because this whole deck is singletons, it's really more of you could run both just because, you can only have 1 copy of both in the deck. And the last card in the Dragoncraft section is Dragon Wings. It's a 3-cost spell that says deal 2 damage to each follower on the field, and if Overflow is active for you, deal 3 damage instead. Just keep in mind that this also does include your own followers, but otherwise, helps with a lot of, board damage and board clear. Alucard is the only Abysscraft card from the starter decks I'll be talking about. He's a 7-cost 4/4 follower, which doesn't sound like that it's that great, but he does get Storm, and on Fanfare, if you have Necrocharge 10, he does get +2 attack, which, in this game is not going to be too hard to do in, Gloryfinder. On Strike, he does have a nice effect where you can select an enemy follower on the field, deal 4 damage, and you heal yourself 4. So a little bit of sustain, a little bit of damage, some storm damage. So just a good card all around. And especially since it's a 7-cost, you could potentially res it back with Death's Breath for only 6 instead of 7. And then he also would get Ward in that case as well. Up next is Hair of Illusions. It's a 0-cost amulet that you can tap and put into the cemetery to select an enemy following the field and engage it. So if you need to kill something and it's standing, you can at least get it, engaged to attack it with your own follower. And then its second effect is you can pay 10 play points and tap it and sack it to banish each follower on the field. That does include your own followers, but if your opponents have pretty big scary followers or they have followers that have pretty good last word abilities, you can do Hair of Illusions for essentially your whole turn, more in the late game to just, have it be a non-issue. Acolyte's Light is up next. It's a 4-cost spell, so pretty expensive, but it does have Quick, and it says select an enemy follower on the field, banish it, and give your leader 2 defense. So it's just literally banish anything for free with Quick. So pretty close to execute, but it's only followers instead of cards. And then you also get 2 life for a little bit of sustain. So, and with it being banished, the last words don't trigger either. So pretty good card. And we're finishing not only Havencraft with the starter decks, but also the whole banishing theme with Priest of the Cudgel. He's a 3-cost 3/3 that evolves for 1. That on evolve, you can select an enemy follower on the field with 3 defense or less on the field and banish it. So it's kind of like a better Dragon Warrior, I suppose, in that sense. But, at least Dragon Warrior can deal 3 damage to something that even has more than 3 defense. But still, you get to banish a 3 defense or less follower, and, it still gets rush. And keep in mind that it's 3 defense in regards to just what its current defense stat is. Its defense doesn't have to be originally 3. A lot of times, at least maybe for me, I always thought it was just it had to have 3 defense, like on summon or less. But, even if you can get something big down to 3, you can at least be like, okay, I'll finish it off with Priest of the Cudgel. All right, moving on to set 2, we have the card summary here. So if you don't want to listen to every single explanation, here's just a list of them I'm going to be talking about. With Forestcraft, we have Crystalia Lily and her Evo, Rose Deer. In Swordcraft, we have Alexander. In Runecraft, we have Witchbolt, Rhymewind, and Craig, Wizard of Mysteria, and his Evo. In Dragoncraft, we have Dragonic Fervor. In Abysscraft, we have Azazel, Soul Dealer, and Underworld Watchman Kawi. In Havencraft, we have Tribunal of Good and Evil, and Statute Seraph, and Radiance Angel and its Evo. And then in Neutral, to top it off, we have Bahamut and his Evo, Call of Kakaitis, Archangel Reyna and her Evo, Dark Angel Olivia, Surefire Bullet, and Dance of Death. First up is Crystalia Lily. She's a 2-cost 1/3 that on Fanfare, you look at the top 2 cards of your deck and you may reveal a Crystalian or Pixie follower from among them and add it to your hand and put the remaining cards in the bottom of your deck in any order. So I guess if you're running a more Pixie or Crystalian themed deck, you can get that. But normally that effect really won't get you anything special. But she does evolve for 2, and on evolve, you can select an enemy follower on the field and put it on the bottom of its owner's deck. So it's kind of like a banish, where they also don't get the last words, but you do know it's at least like back in the deck. So unless the opponent does shuffle their deck, it's effectively out of the game. But most Gloryfinder decks in some way, shape, or form can shuffle. So, you really won't have to worry about thinking about that. It's gone forever, but at least it's just gone for the moment. Rose Deer is up next. It's a 4-cost 4/3 with Rush, and on Fanfare, you get a Thornburst token in your EX area. So Rush is pretty good for just dealing with some follower on the board, but also the Thornburst is a really good spell. It's a 2-cost spell that says you can select an enemy leader or enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage and draw a card. So not only, can you kind of pick whether you want to deal damage to a leader or a follower, but also you just get to draw a card as well for consistency. So pretty good overall. It's kind of, potentially up to like a 2-for-1, depending on how you, play the card. Alexander is the only Swordcraft follower we'll be talking about from this set. It's a 6-cost 5/9, so very weird stats, but it does have Rush and Assail, so it can run into things pretty well, and it says during the turn, whenever it deals combat damage, you refresh it, so you can basically, as long as it's alive, which 9 defense is pretty good, but as long as it's alive, you can keep crashing it into enemy followers. Combat damage does not count. Based on the phrasing, I guess you could think it means if you swing at an enemy leader, but combat, when it says it deals combat damage, it means damage to a follower. It's not combat when you attack an enemy leader, so it's not like a free auto refresh every time it swings and hits a leader. So I just want to say that for clarification's sake, but it's more meant to just be like a board control, board wipe kind of card. All right, moving on to the set 2 Runecraft cards. We are starting strong with Witch Bolt. It's a 3-cost spell that says you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 5 damage. And if there's an Evolve follower on the field, draw a card. Considering your deck can have up to 20 Evolve followers, that can happen more times than not, depending on how everything pans out. But just really good board control and just more consistency for your deck ultimately. Rime Wind is a 2-cost spell with Quick that says select an unevolved enemy follower on the field and return it to its owner's hand. And if you have Spell Chain 10, you can put it on the top of their deck instead. So just pretty good, board control and, prevents things like Last Words from triggering. And if it's a big enough threat, kind of makes the issue go away for a round of turns. Craig, Wizard of Mysteria, is next. He's a 2-cost 2/1 that evolves for 1. So basically you can just evolve him on the first turn, and on Fanfare you draw a card, then discard a card, and then when he evolves you do the same thing, you draw a card and discard a card, along with getting Rush, for evolving. So pretty good, at least like starting turn, consistency booster card, and a little bit of board control if you need to run him into something small. The only Dragoncraft card we'll be talking about this set is Draconic Fervor. It's a 5-cost spell that says increase your max play points by 1, give your leader 3 defense and draw a card. So pretty much everything you'd want in a Gloryfinder deck. I haven't put it as a C because you kind of want ramp sooner than later. By turn 5, you're probably going to start to hit the followers that you want to just consistently play. So I don't kind of put it as high on the list as something like Dragon Oracle, but it's still a good, secondary option for the deck regardless. Up next is a really good card, so good that, despite it having a C, I'm still just going to mention that it's really good in core to the deck, and it's Azazel. It's a 7-cost 6/6, which is expensive. However, if you have Necrocharge 10 or more, it does cost 3 less to play. He does evolve for 1 and has Bane, and on Fanfare, everyone except for you randomly discards a card. And then when he evolves, he still retains his Bane, but also on Evolve, you change everyone else's life to 10. So if everyone's at 30, you basically just negged everyone's 60 life. So needless to say, everyone's going to hate you, but this is the card why paying a little bit of life early on is not a big deal, because if you go down to 27, let's say, by paying 3 life or something, it's like, okay, oh no, I'm still going to be down at 10 at the end of the day. So it always feels like anything more than 10 life just feels like just bonus life at the end of the day. So that's why, using life is not a huge deal, at least until you get to about 10 or less. Gold Dealer is up next. It's a 4-cost 6/5 follower, which is pretty good stats. However, it does have the downside of you do have to deal 3 damage to yourself, but he does also have ward, so that's nice. He evolves for 2, and on evolve, you can select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and give your leader X life, and X equals the selected follower's attack. So, especially since you start with 30 life, 3 damage to yourself is usually not that big of a deal. But just being able to also pop something that basically, as long as it has 3 or more attack, is basically 3 is a wash, but anything more than 3 is just, plus life. No complaints. He's got good stats at 7/6 with ward if you do need the defense. So overall, just a good solid card. Underworld Watchman Kawi is next. He's a 5-cost 5/5 with a ward, and he's very similar to Soul Dealer in the sense of his last word is you can select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and give your leader X life, and X equals the selected follower's attack. So very similar to Soul Dealer. He just creates a general interesting issue for people where if you do deal with him, you gotta kind of know what has your most attack because it's just going to be targeted. So they kind of, even in single player like standard, it just Kawi is such a hassle to deal with because he just deals with boards really well and just creates this weird shift where it's like you have to get rid of them, but at the same time you also are trying to do it where you have nothing on your own board, so it's not one of your followers that's being popped. But at the same time, if you have followers that want to attack, you want to attack with them to the leader directly instead of trying to swing at Kawi. So it creates this weird like push and pull dynamic. And you could also potentially use if your opponent has Kawi, but they also have a different like bigger follower, it's like you could crash into the Kawi with your own followers, and then your opponent can select a different big threat on someone else's board. So it creates this weird like push and pull like dynamic that's really weird and interesting. Moving on to Havencraft, we have Tribunal of Good and Evil. It's a 5-cost amulet that on fanfare you can select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it, and then you can act and sack the card to draw a card. So just good general enemy removal and a little bit of draw for consistency. In Statute Seraph is up next. It's a 6-cost amulet that says it can't be destroyed by abilities, and at the start of your end phase, you put a prayer counter on it, and then if the card has at least 4 prayer counters, which means obviously 4 turns have had to go by, you put it into its cemetery, you gain 10 life, and you search your deck for up to 2 cards and put them into your EX area, and they're basically free to play whenever you feel like. The 10 life is nice as well in case you do get Azazel. At least you can get back up to 20 and be, much further away from death. And since you can literally search for any 2 cards and they're free, just grab, some of the biggest dudes in your deck and just, get them for free when you feel like. Or alternatively, you could also get quick spells that, at any time, because they're free, you can just use them on your opponents whenever you need them. Radiance Angel is a 4-cost 3/4 follower with ward, and on fanfare you get to draw a card. He evolves for 1, and on evolve you do get 2 life. So a little bit of defense, a little bit of consistency, and a little bit of life. So just overall good, and obviously the rush from Evo. Bahamut is next. It's a 9-cost 9/9 follower that on fanfare you just destroy every other follower on the field other than himself, but that also includes your own followers if you do have any on your own board. And then if there are at least 2 enemy followers on the field, he can't attack leaders. So if your opponents want to try to keep him from attacking, they just have to play more followers. He does evolve for free, which is crazy, and he actually gets a +2/+2 off of evolving. And on evolve, he also destroys every amulet on the field as well. So just a good overall board wipe. And 11/11 is just nothing to ignore. So this would be like prime Soul Dealer, Kawi targets. Imagine that, 9 life or 11 life gain. That'd be pretty crazy. Call of Cocytus is next. It's a 6-cost spell with quick that says select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, then search your deck for a neutral follower, reveal it, and add it to your hand. So you could not only kill like your opponent's Bahamut, like we just mentioned, but then you could also grab your own copy of Bahamut, or there's also Israfil or Lucifer. Just many good neutral options. There's also Flaming Glass that I haven't even shown, but you could run it and just tutor for it. So a lot of good, just neutral options. Also board control with quick. It's just pretty crazy overall. Up next is Archangel Reyna. She's a 4-cost 4/5 with ward. She evolves for 1, and on evolve you recover X play points, and X equals the number of face-up followers in your evolve deck, and then you turn them face down. So, with you having a 20-card Evo deck, getting to 10 cards in Evo is not super hard to basically regain more play points to play more cards. Also, just keep in mind it does say number of face-up followers in the evolve deck, so things like drive points or carrots or advanced followers. Actually, no, advanced followers do work because it's just followers. I was thinking instead of all followers, but yeah. So mainly just drive points and carrots don't count towards Archangel Reyna and flip face down. But, it does give you a little bit of cycling where you can replay evolved followers that you already played. So it can get pretty crazy if you're a very Evo focused deck. Up next is Dark Angel Olivia. She's a 5-cost 5/5 that on Fanfare you can choose up to 2 of the following 4 effects. The 4 effects being you can gain an Evo point, you can give your leader 3 life, you can draw a card, or each opponent discards a card. So just very general neutral effects. I've had it where in single player I've even been okay with just plain Death's Breath. This is more like early on in like set 3 or 4, but I've been fine with even rezzing her with Death's Breath, even though technically you're paying 1 more play point to play her. You do get a lot of benefits. Also, if you run Loki in your deck, if you played him on the previous turn, on this turn, you could use her Fanfare twice and effectively get 4 different effects, and you could even duplicate your effects at that point. So just really good, just whatever you kind of need, she can just kind of provide. Next up is Surefire Bullet. It's a 2-cost quick spell that says select an enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage. And if there's an evolved follower that you selected, you deal 4 damage instead. So this is really prime targeting for the 3-cost 3/3 followers that evolve for 1 into 4/4s, like Dragon Warrior and all the other clones that are similar to it. Pulsefire Assault is the exact same card as Surefire Bullet and does count as it in the deck. So you can't run 1 Surefire Bullet and 1 Pulsefire Assault, because you can see on Pulsefire Assault, it does say in small text Surefire Bullet, so it does consider itself to be that card. But I just want to put Pulsefire Assault up here as just a alternative printing option in case you want high rarity, or I can't imagine Surefire Bullet would be like, printed out of existence, because it's pretty common and printed a few times. But if you kind of want more waifu material, you got Pulsefire Assault. And the last card in set 2 is Dance of Death. It's a 4-cost spell that says you can select an enemy follower on the field, deal it 5 damage, and deal 2 damage to its leader. So, 2 damage isn't a lot, but, I figured if you're trying to get your opponent down or they're very low, it could just be the difference between a game or not. It's just very neutral, so I just want to throw it in here as an option. Next is the Musume crossover set, because it came out between set 2 and 3. And so with Forestcraft, we have Eat Fast, Yum Fast, Aishin Flash. In Swordcraft, we have Outrunning the Encroaching Heat and Narita Bryan. In Runecraft, we have Agnes Tachyon and her Evo, Agnes Digital, Narita Top Road, and Tosin Jordan. In Dragoncraft, we have King Halo, Champion's Passion, Bamboo Memory, Super Creek, Hishiake Bono, Grass Wonder. And in Abysscraft, we have My Solo Drawn to Raindrop Drums, Nice Nature, Matikane Tannhauser, Maruzensky, and in Havencraft we have The Will to Overtake, TM Opera O, Fate's Forecast, and finish it off is the neutral, which is Riko Kashimoto, Plan Perfection. Eat Fast, Yum Fast is first. It's a 2-cost spell that says choose one of the following. You can either search your deck for a follower with Storm, reveal it, and add it to your hand, or you can select a follower with Storm already on the field and give it +3 attack. Mainly, I thought of this as just a tutor, because there's obviously a lot of Storms in general for the game, and you can just tutor literally any of them with it. But also is the fun fact that you could do a little bit of politicking with the second effect, because it just says give a follower with Storm on the field +3 attack. So if your opponent has a follower with Storm and you want to be like, hey, I'll give you 3 attack to Storm an opponent, next turn or something, you could kind of do that and, kind of scratch my back, I'll scratch yours kind of thing. I doubt that'll happen a whole lot, but just kind of the potential is there for something funny like that to happen. Aishin Flash is the next follower. It's a 3-cost 3/3 that can race for 1, and on race you give her +1/+1, and you can select up to 1 enemy follower on the field and return it to the hand, so it gives a little bit of tempo control. She does get rushed with you when you race her, and also keep in mind with things like Surefire Bullet, Surefire Bullet would still only deal 3 damage to her, despite her kind of imitating an Evo, because even though you're racing her, she doesn't actually become an evolved follower, which is what Surefire Bullet specifically targets. So just keep that in mind with all the Uma cards that might be 3-cost 3/3s at Evo for 1. But yeah, just being able to bounce a card back to the owner's hand is just pretty good. And then you could always rush her into a follower that's on the field as well. Moving over to Swordcraft, we got Outrunning the Encroaching Heat, which is a 2-cost spell that says select a follower on your field, give it Storm, and if it's an Musume follower, give it +1/+1. The big thing here is just giving a follower Storm. That's why Deepwood Anomaly and Outrunning the Encroaching Heat are banned together, being in the same deck, because you could just play Deepwood and then just give it Storm, and then you just auto win. So, it doesn't give people a lot of time to be able to counter Deepwood, so that's why they choice restricted it, where you can either have Deepwood or Outrunning the Encroaching Heat. So just keep that in mind. But otherwise, pretty good to just give something Storm, especially if it has high attack like Bahamut or something. Narita Bryan is up next. She's an 8-cost 6/8 that you can race for 1, but honestly, you're probably not ever going to race her. But she does have quite a few stats with Bane, Ward, and Aura. And then you can also engage her to select an enemy leader or follower on the field and deal it 5. So just free 5 damage without actually having to have it swing into something. And the Aura is nice because it makes it tougher to deal with, and with defense, with Ward. So just kind of good stats overall. You probably would want to try to cheat her out somehow, whether it's like through Death's Breath or some other things like tilting at windmills or Phoenix Roost, but just pretty solid overall. And especially since you start with 3 play points, you get to turn 8 not turn 8, but 8 play points much quicker, and especially with Dragon Oracle and stuff. So this card isn't as much of a late game card as you would initially think it would be. Agnes Tachyon is up next in Runecraft. She's a 2-cost 2/2 that you can either evolve for 1 or race for 1. Honestly, 99% of the time you're going to evolve her. But also she just has a consistent effect of whenever you play a spell, you can give an enemy follower -1/-1, and it's not once per turn. So you could always, even do something like Dragon Oracle, ramp 1, and then just give something -1/-1. Keep in mind too in the game that if something hits 0 defense with a minus, defense debuff, it is like magic where it just insta kills the follower, so it can kill if it hits 0. On evolve, you can select a spell in your cemetery and add it back to your hand. So prime option is something like Dragon Oracle, where you can just even come around to the next turn, you can just pay 2 to ramp 1 more. Or just literally any other cards like Death's Breath or anything else. Just really good general options to choose from. We have another Agnes. In this case, it's Agnes Digital. She's a 1-cost 2/1 that you can race for 1, and on race you draw a card and discard a card. So she's mainly there just for the consistency. She unfortunately doesn't even get a +1/+1 buff when she races, which is unfortunate, but still just being able to draw and discard a card to kind of fix your hand and get cards in the cemetery you want, not a bad thing at all. Up next is Narita Top Road. She's a 3-cost 3/3 that can race for 1, and on race you can give it +1/+1, and then you draw 2 and then discard a card. Unless you're literally the first person playing in the game, you can play her turn 1. I'd say probably 75% of the time you basically have at least 1 evo point to use on her. And same thing with Aishin Flash. Surefire Bullet won't kill this if she does get the +1/+1. She's not considered an evolve follower, so just keep that in mind. But overall, just more consistency, and she gets Rush when you race her. So yeah. The last Rune Uma card is Tosin Jordan. She's a 2-cost 2/1 that you can race for 1, and on last words, you can select a spell in your cemetery and add it back to your hand. So the idea being, you play her for 2, you can race her for 1, crash her into something, hopefully killing it, and then she dies from the crash as well, and then you can recover a spell that can be used later on. Moving over to Dragoncraft, we're starting with King Halo. She's a 6-cost 4/4 that on Fanfare, you can either choose one of the following 2 effects. You can either put the top card of your deck into your EX area and do it 3 times. So effectively you're drawing 3 without affecting your hand size. And then, or 2, you can search your deck for a Kawakami Princess card and put it onto your field. Most decks, for all intents and purposes, are probably just going to do the first effect of effectively drawing 3 for the EX area. You could race her, but it's not like super necessary or something you're probably going to plan on doing all the time, but just the consistent 3 draw is real nice. Champion's Passion is a fun amulet. It's a 7-cost amulet that says on Fanfare, if there's another Uma card on your field, you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 4 damage. If that happens, awesome, but the fun part is the second half, which says at the start of your main phase, you can select an enemy leader or enemy follower on the field and deal 4 damage. So when it gets around to your main phase, you can kind of do a little bit of politics and see if you're, be like, oh, should I swing, deal the 4 damage to you, enemy leader, or, if I don't do it, will you promise you'll do something for me? A little bit of trading, or, just 4 damage if you just want to deal with an enemy follower. So just, adds a little bit of fun politics to the game. Bamboo Memory is next. She's a 2-cost 2/3 that you can race for 1. She doesn't get any buff on race, unfortunately, but her fanfare is you can discard a card, deal 2 damage to each enemy leader. The discard is optional because it has that colon, so the discard is a cost. But obviously, if you're going to play her, you're probably going to want to discard a card. So if you want something in the cemetery, you could, do that with her. 2 damage to each enemy leader isn't a lot, but hey, at least it's 6 total damage, so better than nothing at least. Next up is Super Creek. She's a 6-cost 5/5 that has ward, and on fanfare, you just get 5 life. So if your opponent has this out, you down to 10. Hey, at least you're at 15 now. And if you played Loki on the previous turn and then you play Super Creek, you get 10 life. So, not bad. And then you get ward for a little bit of defense. The race is optional. If you want to at least have her run into something a little bit to deal with a threat, cool. So, but it's mainly there for the sustain and the ward. Next up is Super Creek on steroids. It's Hishiakebono. It's a 10-cost 10/10 that on fanfare you get 10 instead of 5 life you would get with Super Creek. But granted, obviously she's more expensive, and she does get race as well, so you can pay 1 to race her and have her at least swing into something with 10 stats. She'll probably survive more than likely into anything. And again with Loki, if you played Loki the previous turn and then you're able to play Hishiakebono the next turn, you get 20 life. So if you got Azazel back down to 10 and that happened and you played Loki, then Hishiakebono, you're back up to 30 and everyone else is, down low. So, really big life swings with her. It's really funny. The last Dragoncraft card is Grass Wonder. She's a 5-cost 5/5 that you can race for 1, but on fanfare, she deals 2 damage to each enemy follower on the field. So essentially just helps kind of deal with, big boards. Arguably, I think Odile Black Swan is a better option, which I'll get to in set 3. But, in case you want a second option, Grass Wonder is not too far behind her. There are a handful of 4-cost quick spells that let you just insta-kill an enemy follower. And so my solo drawn to Raindrop Gums is kind of the first one. As far as I know, I think there's like 2 or 3. But this is one that basically on quick, if you have at least 10 Uma cards in your cemetery, costs 2 less to play. That's probably not going to happen on a regular basis, so you can kind of ignore that. But again, like the main point is just you get to select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it. So pretty good just to deal with an instant threat. Nice Nature is up next, or sometimes, as I like to say, not so nice nature. She's a 3-cost 3/3 that can race for 1. She doesn't get anything on racing, but on fanfare, you can give something -1/-1 stats, which is, okay, I guess, not a big deal. But her last words is each opponent has to discard a card, so you kind of be a jerk to your opponents and make them have to discard something. It's not the most impactful effect, but, hey, at least making them discard something is better than nothing. Matekane Tannhauser is next. She's a 4-cost 4/4 follower that you can race, like all the other Umas. But on fanfare, she also lets you just destroy an enemy amulet on the field. There's going to be tons of enemy amulets in general in the game, so just kind of keep her in mind as an option, along with Execute. She's just a second alternative option. Last for Abysscraft is Maruzensky. She's a 3-cost 3/3 that you can either race or evo for 1. Most times than not, you're going to evolve her. But on fanfare, if you have Necrocharge 10, you give an enemy follower -4/-4. And if their defense hits 0, effectively they die. And then you can evolve her for 1. And on evolve, you can give another enemy follower on the field -2/-2. So you could either split the 4 and 2 damage between 2 different followers, or if there's like one big 6/6 or something, you could just, hit it all into the 6/6 and kill it. And then it still obviously gets rush whether you race it or evo it. All right, shifting over to Havencraft, we have the Will to Overtake, which is a 1-cost amulet that says on fanfare, you can look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put any number of cards from among them to the top of your deck in any order, and then put the rest to the bottom of your deck in any order. And then you can pay 2 to sack the amulet and draw a card. So it's effectively, turn 1 with 3 play points. You play it, you check top 3, rearrange it to whatever you think is most useful to you, and then you just sack the amulet and draw a card. So it's another just very early game consistency card. EM Opera O is next. She's a 7-cost 6/6 that you can race for 1. But also the biggest thing of her is her fanfare, which is select an enemy follower on the field, banish it, and draw a card. So, if there's a good powerful last word effect, there is not anymore, and you get a little more consistency with drawing a card. And keep in mind, too, you can grab her back with things like Hell's Unleasher or Death's Breath. So there's a few ways to get her back potentially. So just pretty good removal in general. Fate's Forecast is another one of these 4-cost cards that just destroy an enemy follower. This one does it on fanfare. The second effect is kind of negligible, and just if it occurs, awesome, but if not, it's not the end of the world. But the second effect is you just sack the amulet to look at the top card of your deck. If it costs 7, you can reveal it and add it to your hand. If it's not, it just goes back to the top of your deck. And also just that little bit of hand knowledge, just knowing what's coming next, you might be able to kind of work that into your next turn somehow. So a little bit of foreknowledge is never a bad thing either. And last but certainly not least is Riko Kashimoto, Planned Perfection. She's a 6-cost 6/6 with Rush, and on strike, if you have no other followers on your side of the field, you can select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it and deal 3 damage to its leader. With there being 4 people in the game, followers don't tend to last that long, so it's not usually hard to just kind of play her with no other followers and just rush to run into something and destroy a enemy follower and burn for 3. Keep in mind too, good Death's Breath option, but also if there's only one other follower on the field, you can effectively just have her swing at it. She triggers, destroy it, and deal 3, and she doesn't lose any stats because the effect finishes before her battle would, inflict damage upon herself. All right, we are moving on to set 3, and there is not a lot in set 3. We have Forestcraft with Magical Fairy Lilac and Fen Sprite. Swordcraft has nothing. Runecraft has Witch of Sweets and her Evo. Dragoncraft has nothing as well. Abysscraft has Dark Alice, Odile Black Swan, and Demon Maestro. Havencraft has Diamond Master and her Evo, Odette White Swan, and Wingy Chirpy Gemstone and its Evo, and Neutral has just nothing. First up is Magical Fairy Lilac. She's a 3-cost 1/4 that you can act and engage her to put a Fable counter on her, and then you can pay 1 to remove the Fable counter and select an enemy follower in the field and destroy it. Granted, it's only once per turn, but you can stack multiple Fable counters on it. And what is not once per turn is the paying 1 to remove a Fable counter and destroy an enemy follower. So slowly over time, you can accumulate your Fable counters if she survives that long, granted. But once she does have a few, you could actually blow them on multiple different followers within 1 turn. So adds a little bit of fun politic as far as if you don't destroy my follower, I will do something for you instead. That little kind of you scratch my back and I'll scratch yours kind of politics. And the second Forestcraft card is Fen Sprite. It's a 3-cost 4/3 that on fanfare you can select an enemy follower on the field, and during its controller's next turn it can't attack enemies. So kind of good stun lock there. And if you play something like Loki the turn before, you could actually select 2 different enemy followers and they're stun locked. So a little bit of good board control without having to commit to actual damage to finish off a follower. On the Runecraft, we have Witch of Sweets. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that evolves for 0, actually. But also, she doesn't gain any stat buffs. But on the other hand, you actually get to draw a card, and she does still get Rush, so you can run her into something. So overall, she's just meant to be a little bit of consistency. And if she can run into something, cool. But it's mainly there for the consistency. Moving on to Abysscraft, we have Dark Alice. She's a 6-cost 6/6 with Rush, and on strike, each opponent has to discard a card. And her last words is you can banish the top 10 cards of your deck, and then you can put her back onto the field, but then you also have to discard a card. The last words is optional because the banish the top 10 is before the colon. However, the discard a card is mandatory. However, if you just don't have a card in your hand when you replay her with her last words, you just don't have to discard a card. That part is do it if you can, but if you don't have the card, you can't discard a card you don't have. So in theory, depending on what's on the board and everything, you could force your opponent to discard multiple cards a turn. If let's say Dark Alice runs into another 6 defense follower with 6 attack, she dies, you could bring her back by banishing 10, and then swing again. So effectively, you know, having to make your opponent's discard 2, and you start with 50 cards in your deck, so you don't have to worry about deck out as much. However, there is obviously the downside of you're banishing 10 cards that are probably just never going to come back, which is unfortunate. Odile Black Swan is next. She is a 5-cost 6/4 that on Fanfare you can deal 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. And if you have Necro Charge 20, she gets Storm. And on Strike, she deals 2 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field again. So it's effectively your Fanfare again. Keep in mind with Loki, you know, if you Fanfare her after Loki, it's 4 damage to the board and 4 damage to each leader. So pretty good, you know, 12 damage. Total is pretty solid. So pretty good in general. She is a little slow in the early game, but at least late game, you know, when you have Necrocharge 20, that's something that, you know, in theory can be done. And especially since you have 50 cards in deck, 20 cards in Cemetery is not as big of a deal compared to Standard, where you start with 40 cards in deck. And so 20 is effectively half your deck. So you're kind of getting towards the later half of the game where you need to close out the game. And late game too, if you play her and you have Necrocharge 20, I mean, she does effectively deal 10 damage to at least one individual, between the 2 to the Fanfare, the 6 attack, and then the 2 on Strike. So that's 10 total damage, but obviously 4 damage is also split between the 3 other enemies as well, and their followers. So she can be pretty devastating late game, and early game she's just kind of more just an okay card. Demon Maestro is another consistency card. He's a 2-cost 1/1 that you subtract 2 life from your leader and you draw a card, and it can only be activated once per turn. But, you know, starting off the game with 3 play points, you can just play him. Yeah, you're losing 2 life to draw a card, but a little bit of consistency. Sometimes people might not even have a card to play on the first turn, so it might actually just loop back around to you, and you could actually do him again before, you know, swinging for 1, which is not a big deal, but, you know, going down to 28 or 26 potentially, when, like I mentioned with Azazel, kind of feels like when you're between 10 to 30, it kind of feels like the life is kind of more meaningless. You know, not bad to at least try to get your feet off the ground and get going in a game. Up next is a fun card, Diamond Master. She's a 4-cost 2/5 that on Fanfare you can choose one of the following. You can give her either Storm or Ward, which with a Loki that would trigger twice, which basically you can give it both Storm and Ward. And she also has a fun effect, and this is mainly why I have her in here, of whenever an opponent is selecting cards for an ability, if they can select this card, they must select it. So you could have her on the board along with a different, bigger threat on your board, and your opponents might have cards that would say, you know, select a follower and deal damage to it or kill it, but they have to select Diamond Master first before they could select your other follower. So it's just kind of really obnoxious. She does evolve for 3. Her on evolve is kind of meh, depending on, you know, how you build your deck. It might be worth it, but usually it probably won't be, where you can select a follower with Storm or Ward that costs 3 in your Cemetery and put it onto your field. And then she still keeps that other effect, and especially at 7 defense, like that's a decent amount that people have to get through with spells before they could deal with other threats. So yeah, Diamond Master just kind of really makes this obnoxious, like, look at me card that you just have to deal with card effects before you can deal with other things. Next is Odette White Swan, which is Odile Black Swan's counterpart. She's a 5-cost 4/6 instead of Odile, which is, you know, a 5-cost 6/4. And Odette White Swan says on Fanfare, give 2 defense to your leader and each other follower on your own field. And then her last words is give 2 defense to your leader and each follower on your own field again. She doesn't have that Storm or Strike ability, which is a little unfortunate, but, you know, at least trying to keep your own followers alive with more defense and life is, you know, never a bad thing. So figure throw her in here, and she's pretty neutral and generic in her effects. And last of set 3 is Wingy Chirpy Gemstone. It's a 1-cost 1/1 follower with Ward that you can evolve for 2, and on evolve you can search your deck for a follower with 2 attack or less, reveal it, and add it to your hand. 2 attack doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot of tutors that are really cheap that have 2 or less attack that you can grab. So it's kind of like a tutor for a tutor. But also there is a card later on in the Gloryfinder bundle that is Gloryfinder exclusive called Megara the Indignant, and it's a powerhouse of a card. But what's funny is it also only has 2 attack, so you can actually tutor it out with Wingy Chirpy Gemstone. If you want to see them, you know, feel free to skip ahead to the Gloryfinder bundle. That's going to be kind of the last set of the video. But yeah, Wingy is just, he's kind of more or less just like a tutor for a tutor. It's kind of funny. All right, we are moving on to set 4, which actually has a decent amount of new cards that really help Gloryfinder decks. So, starting off with Forestcraft, we have Starry Elf, then Deepwood Anomaly and his Evo, Cassiopeia, Dolorblade Demon, Fita the Gentle Elf and her Evo. In Swordcraft, we have Armor of the Stars, Barbarossa and his Evo, and Pollux. And then in Runecraft, we have Star Reader Stella, Freshman Lou, and Magic Owl. In Dragoncraft, we have Lightning Blast and Dragon's Nest. And in Abysscraft, we have Fenrir and his Evo. And in Havencraft, we have Globe of the Starways, Aether of the White Wing, Mist Shaman and his Evo, Dark Jean and her Evo, and Zoe, Princess of Goldania and her Evo. And then in neutral, we have Israfil and her Evo, Knight's Way, Staircase to Paradise, and Grimnir War Cyclone and his Evo, and Pure-Hearted Singer, and then finally Mystic Ring. First up is Starry Elf. It's a 3-cost 3/3 follower with Fanfare. You get to search your deck for an amulet, reveal it, and add it to your hand. So just a really good consistency card. And because it is a 3-cost, you can literally play her just turn 1 to grab an amulet you need for later on. Next is one of the choice restricted cards, Deepwood Anomaly. It's a 7-cost 8/8 that has the continuous effect of when this follower deals damage to an enemy leader, you just auto win the game. It does evolve for 1, and on evolve, you get to select an enemy follower on the field and put it to the bottom of their deck. Because of this auto win mechanic, that's why he is choice restricted with things like outrunning the encroaching heat and the Grand Summoning spell that can also basically make him an auto win. So, a lot of times people, if there's no reason to run outrunning the encroaching heat or the Grand Summoning spell, you just run Deepwood Anomaly, because just the moment he hits the board, even if you just hard cast him, everyone just like instantly wants to kill him, because otherwise the game's just going to end next time it's your turn. Cassiopeia is next, and in this set, there was also a kind of crossover event going on where some of the cards would also have Code Geass printings, where they're the exact same, they just have a different art and name, but it's still considered the same card. So between the two, you can only run 1 copy of it. But in this case, Cassiopeia had a CC Woodland Witch variant made, but they're both the same card. So anyways, Cassiopeia is a 5-cost 4/5 that on Fanfare, you can select any number of enemy followers on the field and deal X damage divided between them, and X equals the total number of cards in your hand in EX area. So normally you probably on average get about like 4 or 5 cards in hand to split 4 or 5 damage between any number of followers. But considering you can have up to 7 cards in hand, and then you have things like King Halo, which can just instantly give you 3 cards in your EX area, you could potentially, do 7 plus 5, so like 12 damage between whatever number of followers you want. So she could get pretty crazy if you have a lot of, stored up resources. Dolorblade Demon is next. He's a pretty straightforward card. He's a 4-cost 4/4 that on Fanfare and Last Word, so when he summons and when he dies, you deal 1 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. So it's not a lot, but depending on what the board is and everything, 1 damage could be a big deal. And it's always something to kind of keep an eye out whenever you see cards that say deal damage to just everyone and everything else. So especially with the Fanfare with Loki, it'd be basically 2 damage, which again is not a lot, but hey, I just throwing out options here for you. Next up is Fita the Gentle Elf. She's a 2-cost 2/1 that evolves for 1 to get Rush, and on evolve, give your leader +1 life and draw a card. So nothing crazy, but a little bit of draw, a little bit of board control with her being able to rush into something. Moving on to Swordcraft, we have Armor of the Stars. It's a 2-cost spell that says select a follower on your field, give it 1 attack and 2 defense and aura. So you could, in theory, try to give this to something like Deepwood Anomaly to try to keep it alive with the aura. Makes it harder to target. But overall, it's kind of meant to be better on bigger followers. But, whatever you need, if aura is just a strong effect in general, especially with all the spell effects that I've been showing you guys. So certainly not a bad option for anything in general. Next up is Barbarossa. He's a 5-cost 6/5. However, if there are at least 3 enemy cards on the field, he costs 2 less to play, and that does count each person individually. So if each of your opponents has just one card on the board, he costs 3 instead of 5. He does have a sale, and he evolves for 1. And his last words is you can just put him back in your EX area, so you could just play him again later. Granted, you won't have your Evo, but at least you're not technically losing a card, and at least it's another card you can just throw back on the board if you have the play points. And if your opponent have 3 or more cards on the field, then he's still cheaper to just recast. Alex is a 4-cost 5/5 that on Fanfare says if there's a non-Swordcraft follower on your field, give this follower a +1/+1 in Rush. And so considering, Gloryfinder is a singleton of every class in the game, having a non-Swordcraft follower on the field is going to be pretty common and pretty easy to accomplish. And so getting a 6/6 for 4 with Rush to deal with, bigger followers, certainly nothing to ignore. Star Reader Stella is up next. She's a 3-cost 3/3, so really good card to just start off the game with. She says, look at the top 4 cards of your deck, add one of them to your hand, put one into your cemetery, and put one on top of your deck and one to the bottom of your deck. And then on strike, you can look at the top card of your deck and you may put it to your cemetery. So you don't have to, but if it's something that you just want straight into the cemetery that either you don't want to draw next turn or is just better in the cemetery, you can just chuck it. So really good starting card for when you play the game. Freshman Lou is a 2-cost 1/2 that says on Fanfare, you search your deck for a spell that costs 1 play point, reveal it, and add it to your hand. So it's here mainly because, it's more tutoring for consistency. There are a ton of 1-cost spells that you could search with this. So if your deck cares about having a certain 1-cost spell, perfect. You got a tutor to grab it. And the last Runecraft card for set 4 is Magic Owl. It's a 1-cost 1/1 with Rush, and on Fanfare you can discard a card to draw a card, and then its last words is also the same thing of discard a card, draw a card. So if your deck is very spell heavy, you could pitch a spell you don't need right now and hopefully get something a little bit better and potentially do it up to 2 times. All right, we are moving on to Dragoncraft for set 4, and we're starting off strong with Lightning Blast. It's a 5-cost spell that says quick. You may play it for 5 more play points for a total of 10. You don't have to, but it's just an option. If you do pay 5, you select an enemy follower on the field and banish it. However, if you do pay that extra 5 play points, instead of banishing just that single follower, you can banish each follower on the field. So it's almost kind of like a Themis's decree, but it's banish and it costs 10 instead of 5. And same thing with the Code Geass crossover. There is a printed version called Gurren Revolt that is still Lightning Blast, just different art and different name, but it does have the name Lightning Blast above Gurren Revolt, which means they're both considered the same thing, so you can only run one or the other. Dragon's Nest is up next. It's a 1-cost amulet that says you can tap it and put it into the cemetery to give your leader 2 defense. However, if Overflow is active for you, you also get to draw a card. So the idea is you're basically supposed to just hold on to this until you get 7 max play points or more, and then you can just sack it to draw a card and get 2 life. Anything less and you're kind of not using it to its full potential. Up next is Fenrir. It's the only Abysscraft card I'm going to mention in this set. It's a 4-cost 3/5 that evolves for 1, and when it evolves, it essentially just gets +1/+1 and Rush. And during your turn, whenever this follower takes damage, select an enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage. So you could evolve it for 4. You could potentially run into something that might have 7 defense. It deals 4, and then it deals damage back to Fenrir, obviously, and then you can deal 3 more damage to either, that 7 defense follower, or if there's other followers on the field, just deal 3 to something else. Moving on to Havencraft, we have Globe of the Starways, and it's Code Geass counterpart Dark Charisma, which again, between the two, you can only have 1 in the deck. But Globe of the Starways is a 2-cost amulet that says on Fanfare, you can search your deck for an amulet, reveal it, and add it to your hand. And then it has a quick where you can pay 2, sacrifice it to the cemetery, and give your leader 1 defense and draw a card. So a little bit of tutoring, a little bit of consistency. There's a lot of amulets that have potential to be played in Gloryfinder decks, so it's really just a solid card for tutoring. Aether of the White Wing is up next. She's a 7-cost 3/5 with Ward, and on Fanfare, you get to search your deck for a Haven follower with a different name from this card that costs less than your max play points, and then put it onto your field. So if you hardcast Aether, you're effectively looking for a 6-cost or less Haven follower. And considering a singletons and you can grab from any class, you might have some Haven followers that you could actually pick up with Aether. So yeah, just a good tutor card in general, and she's got Ward with 5 defense, so pretty good defense for survivability as well. Miss Shaman is a 2-cost 2/2 follower that can evolve for 1, and on evolve you can select another follower on your field and give it aura. One cheeky option is to give Deepwood Anomaly aura. Makes it harder for people to deal with them. It's kind of similar to the Armor of the Stars from Swordcraft, and then Miss Shaman still gets Rush. So if you need something to just stay alive for a longer period of time, just run Miss Shaman and give that follower aura. And now we're on to Jeanne d'Arc's counterpart, Dark Jeanne. She's a 6-cost 5/5 that can evolve for 1. And on Fanfare, you deal 2 damage to each other follower on the field, which does include your own followers. And you give each other follower on your own field +2 attack, though, in exchange for, them taking some damage. On evolve, if your leader's defense is at least 5, which considering you start at 30, more times than not, you're going to be at least 5 life or more. You can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 4 damage to it and its leader. The last set 4 Haven card is Zoe, Princess of Goldenia. She's a 4-cost 3/3 that on Fanfare you can deal 2 damage to your leader, and you mill 2 to draw a card. She evolves for 1, and on evolve you get to select an enemy follower on the field and banish it. So overall, taking 2 damage and milling 2, depending on your deck, isn't great. The mill 2 is probably pretty nice for more Necrocharge based decks, but the ability to just be able to banish any enemy follower is just really strong, and she still gets Rush as well. So mainly because of the banish effect is why she's a pretty solid option, generally speaking, regardless of what your deck's game plan is. And we're moving on to neutrals for set 4 with Israfil. She's an 8-cost 8/8 that on Fanfare you give your leader 4 defense, and on strike she deals 3 damage to each enemy follower on the field. She can evolve for 1, and she gets the ability of on strike to deal 5 damage to each enemy follower on the field instead. So it's almost effectively a board wipe unless there's some really big follower. The other things I wanted to mention were she's a great Death's Breath option because she gets resurrected for basically 2 less play points than normal, and she gets Ward. She's a good outrunning the encroaching heat option. There's ways to cheat her out for cheap/free, things like tilting at windmills, or if you're lucky and get her with Phoenix Roost. So you still have enough play points to play something like outrunning the encroaching heat to give her Storm. So options like that. So and the 4 defense is really nice for some sustain, and especially if you played Loki on the previous turn, you get 8 life instead of 4. Up next is Staircase to Paradise. It is a 1-cost amulet that says whenever a follower is put from your field into a cemetery, put a soul counter on the card, and you can act and put this card into the owner's cemetery to look at the top 5 cards of your deck. And you can reveal up to 2 followers from among them and add them to your hand, and you put the remaining cards on the bottom of your deck in any order. And however, that effect can only be activated if you have at least 6 soul counters. So basically 6 of your followers have had to have died before you can use that second effect. The card is, in my opinion, probably a little too slow to be really good. I mean, it's nice that it's a 1-cost, so you can get it out pretty early if you see it. But if you see it more late game, I mean, the game's probably going to be over with before you can really get this off. And, you only get them to your hand. It's not like you get to summon the followers, but depending on what you want to do, I figure just throw it out here as a pretty neutral card, both literally and just effects wise. That if you think it might fit your deck, go ahead. I am here to just tell you the cards, not how to build the deck. Up next is Grimnir War Cyclone. He's a 3-cost 3/4 that has Ward. He does evolve for 2 instead of the usual 1 for most followers. He still retains his Ward, and on evolve, if you pay 4 more play points, he deals 4 damage to each enemy leader and enemy follower on the field. So pretty good, general board wipe of smaller followers. So ultimately, if you want his full effect, you're basically going to have to play him on turn 9 or turn 8 with 1 Evo point for his Evo. So, he's mainly there just meant to be a huge board wipe. The second to last card in set 4 to talk about is Pure Hearted Singer. It's a 3-cost 1/2 that on both Fanfare and Last Words you get to draw a card, so you get a little bit of consistency with her. And considering she's a 3-cost, you can just literally play her turn 1 to at least get 1 card drawn. And then, being a 1/2, she's going to die like relatively quickly. So unless she gets banished or bounced back or something, you'll get to draw another card. And the last set 4 card is Mystic Ring. It's a 1-cost quick spell that says you can put a card from your hand on the bottom of your deck and draw a card. So it's a little bit of cycling. The art kind of reminds me of Soul Ring from Magic. But yeah, it's just mainly they're meant for a little bit of cycling. And if your deck kind of relies on a combo counter going up, it's a 1-cost card. So it makes you being able to do higher cost counters, combo counters much easier as well. All right, we're moving on to set 5. There is quite a few cards in set 5 for Gloryfinder relevant decks. Starting with Forestcraft, we have Izudia, Omen of Unkilling, and his Evo, Morton the Manipulator, Mark of the Unkilling, Mark of the Six. In Swordcraft, we have Gino, Machine Artisan, and his Evo, Octress, Omen of Usurpation, and her Evo, the Imperial Swordsman, Captain Mateo, and his Evo. In Runecraft, we have Truth's Adjudication, and Iron Staff Mechanic, and his Evo. In Dragoncraft, we have God Bullet Golem, Cursed Stone, and his Evo, Colossal Construct, and Total Domination. And in Bizcraft, we have Embracing Wings, we have Rulanai, Omen of Silence, and his Evo, Wings of Lust, Silent Purge, and Thundering Roar. In Havencraft, we have the Apostle of Repose and his Evo, Deus Ex Machina, Ancient Protector, the Disciple of Repose, Unidentified Subject and its Evo, Silver Cog Spinner, Servant of Repose, Demon's Epitaph and his Evo. And in Neutral, we have Miserabane, the Omen of One, and his Evo, Lyrial Archer Throne, and Rosa Mechwing Maiden and her Evo. First up in Forestcraft is Izudia, Omen of Unkilling. He's a 5-cost 4/4 that can evolve for 1. His fanfare is if there's at least 3 hunter cards in your cemetery, you can select an enemy follower on the field, change it to an amulet, and give it the act ability of pay 2 and put it into the owner's cemetery. And the follower still keeps all existing abilities, including Evo and Carrots. His unevolved, though, gives him the act ability of dealing 6 damage to each enemy leader with at least 10 defense. And considering everyone starts with 30, that can happen pretty easily. The fanfare effect, I'm just going to be straight up honest, is not something that will probably happen a lot unless you're purposefully running a lot of hunter cards, which even in Singleton, there's just not a lot of hunter cards. So the main point of him is to be able to just deal 6 damage to each enemy leader with at least 10 defense. And considering that is an act and all you have to do is tap him, if he does somehow survive until your next turn, you could activate it again and deal even more damage. So they could rack up pretty quickly if you don't deal with him. Next up is a pretty interesting card, Morton the Manipulator. He's a 3-cost 3/3 that says at the start of your end phase, an opponent chooses one of the following. They can't draw a card during their next start phase, or they can't increase their max play points by 1 during their next start phase, or they can't play followers during their next main phase. I'm not totally sure. I tried looking up rulings, and I'm not totally sure if you get to choose which opponent triggers that, which in which case normally would probably be just the next person to play their turn. So it's kind of a little bit of a mind game for the opponent on what they want to be effectively screwed out of, and all 3 effects are pretty solid things that most decks want to do on a regular basis. So it's a little bit of fun, well, I guess, manipulation of the game state. Next up is Mark of the Unkilling. Is a 2-cost spell that says select an enemy follower on the field and deal X damage. X equals its defense -1. If there's at least 3 hunter cards in your cemetery, you get to draw a card. The latter half about drawing a card normally probably won't even happen, but the fact that you can deal X -1 damage to an enemy is pretty solid. And I know you might say, well, you're not going to kill it, so seems pretty bad. But if your opponent has something like Bahamut or Israfil on the board, I mean, sure, you can't kill it, but going from 11 or 10 defense, depending on if you're talking about Bahamut or Israfil, going from 11 to 10 defense just down to 1, I mean, for 2 play points is still a lot of damage, even though it doesn't kill them. The last Forest Craft card we're going to talk about is Mark of the Six. It's a 1-cost spell with Quick that just says the next time your leader would take damage this turn, it doesn't take damage. So basically, it's probably going to more than likely be normally used to prevent yourself from dying from an attack. And with only costing 1, holding on to 1 play point later on into the game is nothing that's really hard to do. Moving on to Swordcraft, we have Gino, Machine Artisan. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that evolves for 1 and says whenever you play an amulet, you select a follower on your field and give it 1 defense. Which more than likely is probably going to be Gino usually, if it ever happens at all. And then his on-evolve is you get to search your deck for an amulet, reveal it, and add it to your hand, then shuffle your deck. And then he still keeps the +1 defense to a follower on your field when you play an amulet. He is a 2-attack follower, which means you can run Wingy Chirpy Gemstone to tutor him out, to then tutor later on, an amulet. So, overall, just tutors are just solid. Next up is Octress, Omen of Usurpation. It's a 2-cost 2/2 follower that on Fanfare says each opponent buries the top 2 cards of their deck to their cemetery, and it can evolve for 2. However, if you have at least 10 cards in your opponent's cemeteries, you can evolve this for 0. And as far as I can tell, that means at least just one opponent needs 10 cards in their cemetery. It also has the act effect of if you pay 8, you can just select a card in an opponent's cemetery and play it for 0 play points. So pretty strong there. Her on-evolve says you get to select a card in your opponent's cemetery and put it into your EX area, and she still retains the 8 play point act ability of stealing a card to play for free. But she also, with the evolve, gets an effect that says if there's at least 10 cards in opponent cemeteries, any card you play from the EX area costs 2 less in general. So if you played things like King Halo earlier, where you already have a few cards in the EX area, they do cost 2 less. But long story short, the reason why I kind of threw this card in here was a lot of Gloryfinder cards or Gloryfinder decks are just duplicates of each other in some way, shape, or form. A lot of cards are, universal across most, if not all, decks. So Octress is another way where maybe you haven't seen your copy of your card, but your opponent has, so you could steal it and use it for yourself. Or if you want to, if you already use your own card, like let's say Death's Breath, for example, and you don't have a way in your own deck to get it back, you could use Octress and steal someone else's Death's Breath and use it. So just a lot of flexible, open-ended use case for Octress in general is why I included her here. Next up is Imperial Swordsman. He's a 5-cost 5/4 that says at the start of your end phase, you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 4 damage to it and 2 damage to its leader. So if you can possibly give it aura with things like Mist Shaman, you could kind of try to keep it alive as long as possible and just at the end of every turn, just deal some damage to followers and leaders. So, depending on what you're doing, it might be a good option for you. And the last Swordcraft card in this set we're going to talk about is Captain Mateo. He's an 8-cost 7/7 that on Fanfare you select an enemy leader and deal it 4 damage. And then on Evolve for 1, you get to select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it. So just, some enemy leader damage and enemy destruction. And obviously he still gets Rush from the Evo. Moving into set 5 Runecraft, we have Truth's Adjudication, which is a 3-cost spell that says choose one of the following. If there are at least 2 mage followers on your field, you can choose up to 2 instead. You can either draw 2 cards, deal 3 damage to each enemy leader, or select an enemy follower on the field and deal 3. The 2 mage follower requirement, more times than not, is just never going to happen. But the main point of this card is just on turn 1 with 3 play points, just paying 3 to draw 2. Just get more consistency in the early game when nothing is generally speaking happening. Next up is Iron Staff Mechanic. He's a 5-cost 4/4 that on Fanfare lets you search your deck for a card that costs 1 play point and put it into your EX area, and it costs 1 less to play for the turn. If you evolve him for 1 play point, you can search your deck again for another 1 play point card and put it in the EX area, and it also costs 1 less to play this turn. So just a little bit of deck thinning because, later on in the game it kind of sucks, drawing 1-cost cards because usually they're not very impactful. But they also just get to become free and you get to reshuffle your deck in case something got bounced to the bottom of the deck or something like that. Next up is God Bullet Golem. It's a 6-cost 7/7 follower that says it can't attack enemy leaders, but it can still attack enemy followers. And it has an act where you can engage it and put another follower from your field into its owner's cemetery, and then you can select an enemy leader or follower on the field and deal it X damage. X equals the attack of the follower you put into the cemetery. So a common choice is to play like a Stormer with a God Bullet Golem on the board. You swing with the Stormer, and then you just, tap the God Bullet Golem, sack the Stormer to deal, even more damage. Some other good prime options that even if they don't even get a chance to attack beforehand would be things like Israfil or Bahamut, where they have, anywhere from like 8 to 11 attack, and, 11 attack from Bahamut with God Bullet Golem with somebody who is already Azazel down to 10. I mean, that kills somebody right there. Next up is Cursed Stone. It's a 2-cost 2/2 that evolves for 1 and has Ward. And on evolve, it gets +1/+1, and you can select an enemy follower on the field for the rest of the turn. And during each opponent's next turn, it loses all abilities and can't attack enemies, so it's effectively a stunner. So it works really well if you need to pin something big down and everyone else who doesn't have the big follower is like, I don't have anything, and you can at least be like, well, if I use this on the big follower, can I get something in exchange? You could kind of use it to negotiate the state of the board. So, just a good general option for control. Colossal Construct is next. It's a 7-cost 6/7 with Ward, and it says on Fanfare you can return 5 cards from your cemetery to your deck and shuffle it, and you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 5 damage, and has Ward, like I mentioned. The point of this is more to recur good cards you want back into your deck, and with decent, defensive stats, at least it can stay alive. And with 5 damage, it could more than likely kill something relatively easily. So it's ultimately, though, the whole point of it is just to recur more cards back into your deck. Total Domination is the last Dragoncraft spell from the set I'm going to be talking about. It's a 2-cost spell that says select a follower on your own field. You deal 2 damage to it and each enemy follower on the field. And then if there's a Galmu, Omen of Disdain on your field, you can deal 2 more damage to each enemy follower on the field, but more than likely then that's not going to trigger. But the ultimate point of this is just to be able to deal 2 damage to every other enemy follower and, potentially kill 1 or 2 of them. Up next is Embracing Wings. It's a 3-cost spell that says select an enemy follower on the field, destroy it, and deal 2 damage to your leader. And you can select up to 1 Valneric Omen of Lust in your cemetery and add it to your hand. That latter part, more likely than not, will not trigger because at best case, you're only going to have 1 Valneric. But at the end of the day, the whole point is just to basically destroy a enemy follower for 3 and 2 life. And, if it's early on enough in the game, 2 life out of 33 is like, or not 33, 30, excuse me. Is, almost negligible. Next up is Rulinai, Omen of Silence. It's a 3-cost 3/3 that on Fanfare, if you have Necrocharge 10, you can select an enemy follower that costs 3 play points or less on the field and destroy it. And while he's on the field, any spell an opponent plays costs 1 more. And he evolves for 1, and on evolve, each opponent discards a random card, and he still keeps his extra tax on spells that your opponents might play. So that's just really annoying for opponents trying to play on their turns. Maybe they ramped last turn to try to get enough play points to do some more stuff, but now because of this 1 extra tax, it's almost as if they didn't even ramp. So it can be just a very annoying card based on it's a little bit more timing specific, but it can be a very annoying card based on what your opponents want to do. Up next is Wings of Lust. It's a 1-cost spell that says you can choose 2 of the following. You can either select a follower on your field and give it rush and deal damage to yourself, or select an enemy follower on the field, deal 2 damage to it and 1 damage to yourself, or deal 1 damage to yourself and draw a card and discard a card. More than likely, at least in standard, I usually use effects 2 and 3, but consider it's Gloryfinder. You might actually want to give rush to something just to kill something on the board. Do keep in mind, though, that when you do decide what you want to choose to play, it has to be in the order of how they're listed. So you can't, if you want to choose 2 things and you choose the third effect of deal damage to your leader and draw a card and discard a card, you can't go, okay, well, now I'm going to give something rush now. You have to commit to the 2 out of the 3 in order of what's listed. And the 2 damage you take to yourself, again, and I feel like I'm kind of reiterating this quite a bit, but, early on playing this helps just cycle your hand a little bit to kind of fix your hand better. potentially deal some damage to a follower already on the board. And the 2 damage you eventually take is going to be probably pretty negligible considering you start with 30. Silent Purge is up next. It's a 4-cost spell that says you can select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it, and its controller discards a random card. So easy, follower removal. It's an easy, almost 100% chance to be a 2-for-1, destroy a follower and get rid of a card in their hand. And, if you hit the right card, it could be devastating for what they want to do on their own turn when it comes back around to them. Next is Silent Purge's little brother, Thundering Roar. It's a 2-cost spell that says choose one of the following, and if you have Necro Charge 10, you can choose up to 2 instead. You can either have each opponent discard a random card, which more than likely is probably what you're going to use it for, or you can select an enemy follower on the field and deal 3 damage. But if you do have Necro Charge 10, you basically get both. If you have Necro Charge 10, you cannot choose 2 of the same one. It's one or the other or both if you have Necro Charge 10. Apostle of Repose is next. She's a 3-cost 2/4 that says at the start of each opponent's main phase, you get to recover 1 play point, and she evolves for 2. On evolve, you select a reserved enemy follower on the field and banish it. So just as a reminder, reserved means the follower is standing up vertically, not horizontal. Horizontal is engaged, and it still retains the effect of at the start of each opponent's main phase, recover 2 play points. So it's 2 when it's evolved instead of 1. So really nice for a little bit of board control. Obviously, it gets rush, but the fact that you can also just keep recovering 2 play points at the start of each person's main phase means you might have some quicks in your hand that you'd be able to use more freely since you're recovering some play points. Up next is Ancient Protector. It's a 3-cost amulet that says while this card's on your field, you can't lose the game and your opponents can't win. So really good counter against Deepwood Anomaly. And it says when your leader's defense becomes 0 or less, you put this card into its owner's cemetery and change your defense to 1. So it's also an extra life for when you would actually get down to 0. But really, I kind of made this more of a core card because if everyone is basically going to be running Deepwood Anomaly, you kind of need something that can help counter the just insta-win nature of Deepwood. Disciple of Repose is next. It's a 2-cost 2/2 follower that says at the start of each opponent's main phase, you select an enemy follower on the field and deal 1 damage. And so considering the fact that, it might be able to survive being alive for a turn or 2, maybe even up to 3, and it gets back around to you, you could potentially deal up to 3 damage to a single follower on the field, or if there's just weaker followers, just kill them eventually. So get a little bit of board control, a little bit of mind games with opponents trying to get followers on the board and whatnot. Next up is Unidentified Subject. It's a 5-cost 3/7 follower that says whenever you draw a card outside of your start phase, you give this follower a +1/+1. And considering there's a lot of drawing in Gloryfinder, you might be able to get a free buff. And then it also evolves for 2. And on evolve, you draw 2 cards while still retaining the +1/+1 buff whenever you draw a card. So basically, it doesn't gain any stat buffs from the Evo itself. However, because you do draw 2 cards, it basically becomes a 5/9. And considering, a lot of other cards in your deck are going to probably make you draw cards because clearly all the card, or not all, but a lot of the cards I've been showing make you draw cards. You could potentially just keep going up in stat value. Silver Cog Spinner is next. It's a 4-cost 5/4 that says on Fanfare, if there are at least 5 cards in your hand, you get to recover 2 play points. But if you have 5 or less cards, you get to draw a card. So just depending on, both effects are good, and it's just depending on what your current hand is, you just get one or the other effects. Next up is Servant of Repose. She's a 2-cost 2/5 that says at the start of each opponent's main phase, give your leader 1 defense. So if she can survive for a couple of turns, you're just getting some free life. If she can survive even back around to your turn and then you pass and it's, goes back around again, I mean, you could gain a considerable amount of life. It almost could be a little crazy. So maybe give it Aura with Miss Shaman and, it might live a little bit longer than you'd expect. The last Haven card we'll talk about is Demon's Epitaph. It's a 2-cost 2/3 follower that has a unique evolve where it doesn't cost any play points to evolve. You just have to discard a card. And when you evolve him, he does get Bane and Last Words of deal 2 damage to each enemy leader. So you can crash him into a big follower that will just insta-kill him and then just deal 2 damage to everybody for 6 damage. So, not bad. Nothing super crazy, but, not a bad card, especially if you only have 2 play points. It only needs 2 play points to get its full effect. Moving on to neutrals, we have Miserabane, Omen of 1, or I like to just call him Jerry. He's a 5-cost 5/5 with Rush, and he evos for 1, and he has an effect that says at the start of your end phase, if there are 2 or less cards in your hand, you deal 3 damage to each enemy leader, and if there are 0 cards in your hand, you also get to deal 3 damage to each enemy follower on the field. On Evo, he has the same effect of his base form, where he deals 3 to each enemy leader with 2 or less cards in hand, or 3 to the board, except the numbers are 5 instead of 3. So if you have 2 cards or less in hand, it's 5 to each enemy leader, and if you have no cards in hand, it's 5 damage to the every enemy follower on the field. Lyriel Archer Throne is up next. She's a 3-cost 2/5 that says on quick, you can act and engage her to deal 2 damage to each enemy leader, and while she's on the field, your leader can't take ability damage, so that helps mitigate a lot of effect damage. But just the fact that you can just deal 2 to each enemy leader at quick speed means you can kind of keep her standing during people's turns, and at the absolute latest, when it gets back around to almost your turn, and it's the end of the person before you's turn, you can tap this to deal 2 damage to everybody, and then it comes back to your turn, and then she just stands back up at the start of your turn. So she can be tough to hit, but that being said, there is a lot of effect damage in this game, so probably more times than not, you probably just want to kind of play her sooner than later, because if you don't do it during your turn and it goes around to your next opponent and they just play a spell that pops it, that's it. You don't, there's no quick timing to spells in Shadowverse, like in a lot of other card games where, you know, if she were to die, you could be like, oh, quick, deal 2 damage to everybody, and then she dies. So there's a little bit more mind game, a little bit more thinking about when you actually want to use her effect. But considering, you know, you're going to have 3 other people go around before it gets back to you, more than likely you might as well just use her effect immediately. And the last card in set 5 we're going to talk about is Rosa Mechwing Maiden. She's a 2-cost 1/3 with Ward, and she evolves for 1. And on evolve, you get to draw a card. So, you know, turn 1 with 3 play points, you can just evolve her, get a pretty good statted card with 2/4 with Ward for defense, and you just get the, you know, free draw card. So just good early game card to try to get your hand going. And lastly, we're going to be talking about the Gloryfinder Bundle set that had the 4 Gloryfinder decks. There are Gloryfinder exclusive cards in that bundle that you can't get anywhere else. And we're not going to talk about every single Gloryfinder exclusive card, but at least the ones that are more apt to be pretty generic in its use in whatever way you want. And so we're going to start off with Forestcraft with Burst Shot, Swordcraft with Blitz Lancer and its Evo, Runecraft with Tisiphone the Malignant and his Evo, Electo the Dissonant and his Evo, Megara the Indignant, Icarus and his Evo, and Grand Summoning. And then in Dragoncraft, there are no new Gloryfinder like generic cards. Abysscraft has Milnard, Dark Fiend and its Evo, Person and its Evo, and Relinquish Reason. Havencraft has Lina, Sister of Judgment, and her Evo, and Themys's Purge. And neutral has Odin, Altaia, Holy Angel, Genesis of Legend, Loki, Helblindi, and Athena. Up first is Burst Shot. It's a 3-cost spell with Quick, and it says choose one of the following. You can either select an enemy follower on the field, draw a card, and then deal the selected follower damage equal to the number of cards in your hand, or you can select up to 3 enemy leaders or enemy followers on the field. If your leader is Forestcraft, draw a card, and then deal the selected enemy's damage equal to the number of cards in your hand. So obviously you have more options if you have a Forestcraft leader, but really at the end of the day, I just wanted to mention this card because you know, it's another 3-cost Quick that can deal a decent amount of damage, and you get a draw, so a little bit of cycle. So, you know, just kind of synergizes well with decks in general. Blitz Lancer is the next and only Swordcraft card. It is a 2-cost 3/1 that has Rush. However, if you pay 1 to Evo it, it becomes a 4/2 with Storm. So literally right out the gate, turn 1, you can just summon it, Evo it, and storm somebody for 4 damage, which is pretty crazy. Probably won't make your opponent too happy, but, you know, hey, we're not here to make people happy. We're here to win. So, yeah, pretty good stormer. Okay, so switching over to Runecraft. Runecraft actually got a lot of really strong Gloryfinder exclusive cards. And so we're starting this off with Tisiphone the Malignant. It's a 7-cost 8/7 with Rush and Assail. And it says this follower can't attack enemies more than X times per turn, and X equals the number of opponents you have left. So if you're playing with, 3 other people, it can attack up to 3 times. It has follower strike where you refresh it so it stands back up. And then for the rest of the turn, he doesn't take any damage at all. So he can just assail into 3 different followers and not even take any damage. And then it says at the start of your end phase, if at least 3 enemy followers were put from the field to the cemetery this turn, you get to evolve him. Now, that phrasing is a little interesting because it doesn't necessarily say that the followers have to leave the field due to Tisiphone the Malignant. So if there's other ways that you can destroy followers along with Tisiphone, that counts too. And the Evo doesn't count towards the once per turn clause because there is no gold E icon. His on evolve gives him an insane +2/+2 buff. He keeps his assail and his rush because obviously he's evolved. And it says this follower can't attack enemies more than X times per turn, and X equals the number of opponents you have left, so it keeps that effect. And then his on strike says refresh the follower, and for the rest of the turn doesn't take damage. So he still keeps a lot of the effects from his base form, but just the amount of board control that this card can give is insane. And the fact that his Evo doesn't count towards the once per turn, and he gets +2/+2 for literally no Evo points. It's almost crazy. Electo the Dissonant is up next. He's a 7-cost 6/6 that says on Fanfare, you may put any number of followers from your hand into your EX area, and at the start of your end phase, give +2/+2 to each other follower on your field and in your EX area. So it not only helps alleviate potentially the number of cards in your hand into your EX area where they're usually a little bit safer, but it also just gives them an insane buff at the end of your turn. And he has Ward, and he evolves for 1, and on evolve, you get to select a follower in your EX area, and it costs 5 less to play for the turn. So put something down in your EX area that you want to play that costs 5 or less, and play it for free, and it gets +2/+2 buff at the start of the end phase. This card is just stupid and insane. Megara the Indignant is the last of the big mechs that are Gloryfinder exclusives, and he's a 7-cost 2/9 with Aura, and he can't be destroyed by abilities, but he can still be destroyed by ability damage. And it says at the start of your end phase, select an enemy follower on the field and deal it 10, so that basically insta-kills any enemy follower on the field. And then at the start of your main phase, if he survives all the way back around to your main phase, you get to select an enemy leader and deal it 10 damage. So if somebody else during their turn Azazelled everybody down to 10 and Megara survives and it gets back around to you, you can just literally one-shot one of your opponents. Also, and I mentioned this with Wingy Chirpy Gemstone, Wingy lets you tutor for any 2-attack follower, and Megara has 2 attacks, so you can literally tutor this out of your deck. So this card is pretty strong and insane. Also, if you run Tilting at Windmills in your deck, which is a 6-cost amulet that says you can pay 3 and disengage the amulet to play follower, but the follower gains the effect of at the end of the turn, it dies. If you play Tilting at Windmills and pay 3 to play Megara the Indignant, he's immune from that self-destruct at end of turn effect. Icarus is a 2-cost 2/2 that evos for 1 that says on Fanfare, you can put up to 2 cards from your hand to the bottom of your deck in any order and then draw that many cards. And on evolve, you can do the same thing of put up to 2 cards from your hand and the bottom of your deck in any order and draw that many cards. So a little bit of hand cycling without necessarily having to put it in the cemetery if you want to, eventually shuffle your deck later and get the card back potentially. But it is a little bit unfortunate that you do have to put the cards away to the bottom of the deck first before you get to draw. Ideally, in a perfect world, you'd want to draw the cards first and then put back what you don't need. But, it's just another consistency option at the end of the day. And the last Runecraft spell, but certainly not the least, is Grand Summoning. It's an 8-cost spell that says search your deck for a follower that costs 3 or less and a follower that costs 5 or less and summon them. And then if your leader is Runecraft, you can also search your deck for a follower that costs 7 or less and summon it and recover 2 play points. So just getting a lot of advantage. On its own, it's good with, 3 and 5 being 8. So, at the very least, you should be able to get, 8 play points for an 8-cost total number of followers. But if you do have Runecraft as your leader, you get just so much more insane amount of advantage. And there's a combo that honestly I don't remember off the top of my head what it is, but there's a combo that you can do with Deepwood Anomaly with Grand Summoning where essentially you can get Deepwood and a way for him to just finish the game off very easily with, almost no chance for your opponents to counter and try to stop Deepwood. So that's why Grand Summoning has been choice restricted with Deepwood Anomaly. Abysscraft is next, and they do get a decent number of Gloryfinder specific cards. There are a few more specific to Gloryfinder than the ones I show here, but they tend to be more for certain playstyles, so I didn't consider them to fit well enough to be included in this list. But we're starting off with Milnard, Dark Fiend. She's a 3-cost 3/5 that says at each opponent with at least 7 cards in hand discards to 3. So if your opponent is kind of hogging cards in their hand, you're going to teach them a lesson real quick. And then she evolves for 1, but you can only activate only if there are 2 cards or less in your own hand. So it's a little bit of a tougher stipulation. She does get Storm, which is nice. But on strike, you also get to draw 2 cards and recover 3 play points to probably, continue on with your turn. Up next is a really good card. It's Person, not a person, just Person. It's an 8-cost 6/6 follower that has Bane and has an act where if you pay 1 play point and you can discard him, and you can discard him from your hand, I should specify, and then you can discard any number of cards of different classes and then draw that many cards. So if your kind of starting hand is kind of crappy and not that great, you can discard Person and pay 1 to, even potentially discard the other, 4 cards in your hand and then draw that many back if they're all different classes. And neutral does count as a class, so you can discard a neutral card to draw a card. He evolves for 1, and on evolve, you can reveal cards from the top of your deck until you reveal 2 followers, and you get to summon them for free. And then you shuffle the rest of the cards that you were revealing, and then put them back to the bottom of your deck. The last Abysscraft card is Relinquish Reason. It's a 1-cost quick spell that says select an enemy follower on the field that's attacking your leader, and you may change its attack target to any other leader or follower on the field, regardless of whether it would normally be attackable, based off of game rules. So you could even have the card switch and turn around on itself and attack its own leader. I did have one game where my opponent did think he was going to finish me for game, and I played this against him, and he was also very low on life. And I was like, it wasn't me who's dying, it is you, So this can kind of cause some really funny and crazy moments where you think you're going to blow someone out, and then it's just oh, the tables got turned and now I am being blown out.
Lina, Sister of Judgment, is next. She's a 3-cost 1/4 that has Ward and Fanfare. You select an opponent and they bury a follower and give your own leader life equal to the buried follower's defense. It does evolve for 1 and does gain Bane along with Keep and Ward, and it gains the extra effect of at the start of your end phase, each opponent who has a follower with X attack on their field deals 4 damage to their leader. X equals the highest attack among followers on the field. So basically, whichever leaders have followers with the highest attack, it burns them for 4, so it shames them for having, the biggest follower on the field. And if there's 2 followers with the same attack, both of those leaders will, take 4 damage, and, same if there's all 3 that have the same attack followers. I think the biggest thing with Lina, Sister Judgment, is just the fanfare ability of the bury, mainly because you're making the leader choose a follower that they're going to bury instead of you choosing, so it gets around aura, which is pretty big, and it gives you a possibility if they only have a really big follower like Bahamut or Israfil or something, gets rid of a big threat easily, and you also regain a lot of life. Next up is Themyscis's Purge. It's a 5-cost spell that has 2 abilities, but we're going to kind of go down to the quick effect first. So it says quick, select an opponent, destroy each follower on their field, and give your leader 1 defense for every follower destroyed. So just a really good board wipe, but it's only for one leader. But what's nice is it is at quick timing, unlike Themyscis's Decree, which is slower with no quick timing. But granted, that one is everyone's board. So, pros and cons. And then it has the secondary effect of if it's discarded by an enemy ability, such as something like Rule and I, you get to select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it and draw a card. So it's kind of basically shaming the opponent who made you discard it, and then you just draw a card, so you didn't actually lose anything yourself. Up next is the neutrals for the set. We're starting with Odin. He's an 8-cost 5/4 that has Storm, and he says on Fanfare you can select up to 1 card on each opponent's field and banish them. And keep in mind it is 1 card, not 1 follower. I know there's a lot of cards that say follower, so people are just used to automatically assuming followers, but Odin is anything, which is really big because of mainly in Statute Seraph, because in Statute Seraph it says it can't be destroyed by abilities, but Odin banishes it and doesn't destroy it. So if your opponent's trying to get some big payoff within Statute Seraph. If you can get Odin, then you can at least, thwart that plan. Up next is Altaya, Holy Angel. It's a 5-cost 5/5 with Russian Assail, and also says at Fanfare you can deal 5 damage to each enemy neutral follower on the field. And since there's a lot of neutral followers that are probably going to be played with everybody, this is probably going to trigger pretty frequently. Not all the time, but enough that, something to consider. Next is a very interesting, more party card. It's Genesis of Legend. It's a 4-cost amulet that says on Fanfare, each player reveals up to 1 non-spell card from their hand simultaneously. Each player who revealed an X-cost card summons it, and X equals the cost of the second card when the revealed cards are ordered from highest cost to lowest. And when it's already on the field, you can quick, pay 2, bury the card, and select an enemy follower on the field and destroy it. So a little bit of nice quick timing destruction. But the card is really interesting with the mind games you have to do, because you have to basically be the second highest cost, not the highest. A lot of times, it'd be very easy to say, oh, just, whoever has the highest cost follower gets it. But you got to kind of play this mind game of, if you want to be the second highest, you can't go all the way, biggest follower that you think you can summon, but have to choose something that is a little bit smaller, or even an amulet, because all it says is a non-spell card. So it could even be an amulet if you decided to be. Next up is Loki. He's a 6-cost 6/6 with Ward, and his fanfare is during your next turn, your fanfare abilities trigger 2 times. So that both includes followers and amulets. So real crazy there. Things like the Genesis of Legend would activate twice. Even Odin would trigger twice, so you could banish up to 2 things on each person's field. With Azazel, you would make everyone discard 2 cards randomly. So a lot of potential application for this card, but I didn't put it in core just because if your deck really doesn't focus on fanfare abilities, then you're just not going to obviously care about Loki. Also, one really nice thing to take note of with Loki is he is an Archfiend archetype, so you could actually tutor him out with the Call of Cocytus spell. So, it does add a little bit of consistency to your deck as well in that regard. Up next is Helblindi. She's a 5-cost 5/5 that says at the start of each player's main phase, they roll a 6-sided die, and if they roll a 1, 2, or 3, they give their own leader 1 life and draw a card. But if they roll a 4, 5, or 6, you as the Helblindi owner get to gain a life and draw a card. There's a little bit of weird logic with this card that most cards don't, so I was just going to kind of run through a situation real quick. So what would normally happen is the person who plays Helblindi obviously doesn't get the effect yet because, it only triggers at the start of the player's main phase, and you're already past the start of the main phase when you play her. Then it will go to your opponent to, presumably your left. And when it hits their main phase, they'll roll a die. And if they hit a 1, 2, or 3, your opponent will get the +1 and draw a card. But if they hit a 4, 5, or 6, then you as the Helblindi owner will draw a card and gain a life. Then it'll go to the next opponent, and then the next opponent, same thing. If they hit a 1, 2, or 3, they themselves get the 1 life and draw a card. But if they hit 4, 5, or 6, you as the Helblindi owner will gain the life and draw a card. However, there is one caveat when it comes back around to the Helblindi owner, because 1, 2, or 3 the 1, 2, 3 section is referencing the player's main phase of the turn it is, which is you, and then also 4, 5, or 6 is also referencing you. So basically, if Helblindi can survive to all the way back around to you, it is a guaranteed +1 and draw a card. You really don't technically have to roll a die. Last up for the Gloryfinder Bundle and for the video in general is Athena. She is a 4-cost 3/6 that says while she's reserved, which means she's up vertically on your field, it takes damage instead of your leader. And when she dies, you can select an enemy leader and deal 3 instead. So it's basically a little bit of retaliation. The one key thing I wanted to mention with Athena is that Deepwood Anomaly, if it tries to swing into the follower that has Athena on the board, it doesn't win the game because the damage gets transferred to Athena. And Deepwood says that it has to deal damage to the enemy leader. I guess if you don't have something like Ancient Protector to protect you, Athena might be like the next best thing. And that's it for this video. I do plan on making a part 2 that will cover sets 5 through 10 and the Idolmaster set and the second Gloryfinder bundle and the Vanguard crossover. So kind of keep an eye out for that. This took quite a few hours to kind of review and compile and everything. So
If you appreciate it, give it a like, comment, and subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And if you have any other questions or anything, feel free to put them in the comments and I'll try to get to them. Thanks. Bye.